Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the next episode of the Hard Compound Live. My apologies for the delay, slight technical issues, but we're all sorted and we're all ready to roll. For those of you who don't know, my name's Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport. Give us a search on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Come in and join the fun. We are here to share a love of motorsport, and we cover all kinds of motorsport across the motorsport spectrum. From F1 to touring cars, Indy cars, rallying, bikes, NASCAR, and anything we can shake a stick at. Really, these coverings take the form of race reviews, race previews, throwbacks, birthdays, breaking news, liveries, and anything else that's going on in the world of motorsport. We try and cover it. We put out 3 written articles a day: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Morning, lunchtime, and evening here in the UK. So do go and check them out and come along and come and give us a follow. In case you hadn't noticed, we also do live video interviews, just like this one. And just like this one, these are streamed on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. They're also saved in the video section on Facebook and the live section on our YouTube channel. We've done well over 100 of these. We're approaching 150, I believe. I won't name all the guests. Just a few names. We've had the honour and the privilege of speaking with Mr. Mario Andretti and Mr. Jackie Ickx and John Watson, Hans Stuck, Brian Redman, Mike Wilds, Frank Durney, Chip Ganassi, ex-F1 sports car and IndyCar racers, guys like Mika Salo and Emanuele Pirro and Takuma Sato, Carl Wendlinger, Ari Leyendijk, Willie Ribbs, Danny Sullivan, Derek Daly, Eddie Cheever, David Brabham, Stephanie Hansen, Mark Blundell, Derek Warwick, guys from the GT world. We've spoken with Mr. Max Gertz and Adam Christodoulou recently. We've spoken with Johnny Molam, Alex Tagliani, many great guests. But if you're tuning in tonight, you might be a fan of touring cars. We've spoken to most of the current British touring car grid, guys like Dan Rowbottom and the new champion Jake Hill and Mikey Doble and Rory Butcher, Brendan Pearson, Dan Camish, Sharon Taylor-Smith, and we've spoken to some legends as well: Frank Sitner, Matt Neal, Steve Soper, Ivan Muller, Anthony Reid, Gabriele Tarquini, Andy Prio, and many others. And we've got another legend on this evening, absolute legend, someone I've wanted to speak to for a while, and we finally got it over the line. I'm very glad to hear it. 1992 BTCC champion, double Carrera Cup GB champion, podium finisher at Le Mans, and much more. And he's pretty handy behind the microphone as well. So we're going to bring him in right now. Please join me in extending a very warm welcome to the legend that is Tim Harvey.
I don't think I'm worthy after you've reeled off that alumni of names. I don't really think I'm worthy.
No, you are absolutely worthy, Tim. As you know, actually, I approached you a while ago. You've done so many of these that you politely declined on that occasion. So I'm very glad that you've actually got this over the line. And
I thought now would be a good time to do it because, we've had almost a season of racing in every format, not just touring cars, but everything else. And we were doing a lot of these sort of things in COVID times, sort of everyone was at home and it was a good thing to do. And I got a bit weary of them. So I apologise for putting you off for so long, Rich, but it's a pleasure to be here and join the channel.
Yeah, well, no, there was plenty of annoying people like me wanting to do these chats in COVID, weren't there? So, so I thought I'd just step back for a little while.
That's right. But you changed your deodorant. You changed your deodorant. That was the thing. That was the thing.
that was the thing, wasn't it? It was the it was the odor.
Well, and also the longer I delayed it, the more you increased the fee. So we're now at a point where I can probably pay for my winter holiday just off the back of this.
Oh, if I could pay people, then I would.
You didn't know it was going to be like this, did you?
A charge? That wasn't in the email. It's all good, and I'm very glad that we've actually got this over. And firstly, I need to apologise for collaring you at Silverstone when you're on the way to the comms box to sign those bits for the Race Against Dementia thing. While we're on that subject, guys, thank you very much to everyone who's donated to that. We've raised over £2,000, which is incredible. So thank you, and we're doing the draw in the next few days. Right, very quickly. Oh, good. There's well over 100 people already. Hello. Right, folks. You're already talking away in the comments, which is lovely to see. Hello to everyone. If you have any comments, questions, do work them in. We're going to be going through chronologically, so bear that in mind. And we'll, yeah, if you have any comments, questions, put them in, and we will get ourselves round to them. Right, that's the intro bit done.
I did say in my sort of little preview to this that nothing was off, no topics were off the menu. So, but I might be regretting that. You'll have to vet the questions.
We'll see how we go, guys. Keep it clean. All right, thank you. Right, anyway, so here we are. Again, Tim, thank you very much for coming on. I very much appreciate it, and for signing that lovely print that I spoke with you at the Autosport show almost a couple of years ago, and you signed that lovely RS500 print for me. So thank you for that. I've just seen Bradley Graviton. Evening, Brad. He's just said, ask Tim if he said, ask Tim if he has that tenner he owes me.
The good thing about old age is forgetfulness, Bradley, so I can't remember that tenner.
That's long gone, Brad. Sorry, mate. No, no, good stuff. Right, okay. Enough of that. What I'd like to do is, well, no, actually, no. Firstly, you've said that you're having a bit of a break now, which is good. It's been a hectic year. Firstly, something that's the breaking news today. Two things. Bobby Thompson, member of the BRDC now, which is absolutely thoroughly well deserved. He's joined the club, and it's great to see Jake Hill back next year with Laser Tools, isn't it? And MB Motorsport. I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer, but these things can sometimes fall flat. But two great bits of news for the BTCC, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Bobby. Well, I wish we could get Bobby back on the grid. Obviously, that would be even better news. You know, he's more than proved that he's worthy of a place on the grid, and he is that. Yeah, he's in that sort of mould that Jake was in a little while ago, struggling to get a position with a good car and a good team. You know, Jack Goff was in the same sort of position, and you know, it's really frustrating when you know that there are drivers with real talent that just can't get the commercial side of it together. You know, all the you know, the internet experts will say, "Oh, you know, Bobby should be in this car," or "Bobby should be," but it just doesn't happen like that. You know, it's, without the money, the wheels don't turn. And Bobby's worked bloody hard at getting the deals together that he has done, and sadly, talent alone isn't enough. You know, the good thing for Jake is that he's got Mark Blundell looking after him. You know, Bobby needs a benefactor commercial partner like that. I know he's got people helping him, but somebody that can get him into a decent car.
Because he obviously got he actually got into the car, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Like Snetterton and
drove really well. Drove really well that day.
Yeah, I think it was our good friend Jacob Ebery, the photographer. He was saying, "Oh, you can win one of my calendars, and all you got to do is tell me your standout moment of the season." And there was so many obvious ones, and I had to go for Bobby at Snetterton, stepping into the car, didn't have that much time in the car testing, and plonked it on the podium.
But no, I mean, you know, let's hope something happens for him. The other bit of news you talked about, Jake being back with Laser Tools and West Surrey Racing. Well, yeah, that's they've had a really good partnership together. We're not sure what the complete makeup of that West Surrey team is going to be actually next year. It's going to be very interesting.
Yes,
I know that I've spoken, in fact, just 10 days ago with both Adam Morgan and Colin Turkington. They were both saying that BMW are scaling back their input once again, which they've done for several years on the trot now. So all bets are off as to who the other drivers will be in that team.
Yes, it'd be strange not seeing Colin there if it's not him, because obviously he's been there for so long. He's kind of, you know, he's part of the furniture, and I think Adam alluded to looking at some options. So yeah, we'll see. I'm not sure if Dick Bennett is tuning in. He sometimes does, so I'm just going to bite my tongue just in case I say something I shouldn't. But no, good stuff. What you got here? Bobby Thompson definitely has the talent. Shame his business is about money, but such is life. Hope that WSR drive drummed up support, maybe in that rumoured second MB car. Yes, that's a rumour going around, isn't it? That's from Dan Makey. Thank you, Dan. Right, about Tim Harvey. So what I'd like to do is start right at the very start, if I may. I mean, where did your interest in motorsport come from? Because you grew up not far from Brands Hatch, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I lived around Brands Hatch. You know, as a very small boy, it was sort of trips to Brands Hatch. My dad and my mum actually both used to compete in amateur motorsport events when motorsport was very much a hobby for people. It was a picnic in the back of a Mini Cooper or a Lotus Cortina and go off to Brands and compete in sprint races, which were basically just timed runs against the clock. Things like that. So my earliest memories are sort of, you know, me and my brother in sandals and shorts running around the paddock at Brands with the very old corrugated iron tin roofs in the paddock, and you know, being around cars and family friends, because there would be lots of family friends doing it, and it was just a social fun thing to do if you had an interest in cars, which both my parents did. So that was where the interest came from.
And obviously being around cars, being in the paddock and doing all that, I guess it was inevitable that at some point you wanted to have a go. Do you remember when you first thought, I want to have a go at this? And was it karting your first?
No, I mean, as a lot of people know, my passion is actually motorbikes.
Yes.
Yeah, motorbikes is my passion. So as a kid, I was, you know, in summer holidays, I was round at my mate's house on sort of rat bikes, basically. And then I managed to sort of get a schoolboy scrambler motocross bike and did a few events like that. It was always bikes, but no one else in my family was sort of interested in bikes, really.
Right.
And then sort of at some point, my brother, who's 2 years older than me, got a 100cc racing kart. And we trogged off to Tilbury Circuit, which was the sort of nearest one to us in Kent, and did a couple of practice days there with it. And I thought, actually, this is something I could do with my brother. And, you know, it's easier than falling off a motorbike every weekend and getting hurt. And so maybe I should give this a go. So that was honestly where it started.
Okay.
As a teenager doing karting.
Okay. Because Mark Blundell, didn't he, started on doing motocross, started on 2 wheels and things like that? And
yeah, quite a few people have actually. Yeah. Alan Morrison was back in the day. Alan Morrison was British champion in motocross. So
that's right.
A lot of people didn't know that when he was, and that was his link actually with Honda. He was a Honda factory rider.
I see. Right, gosh, because obviously he raced in the Civic, didn't he, and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always glad when someone says bikes, because people don't know this. I'm a huge bikes person. It started with bikes with me, with my dad as well. He was a biker way back. He took me to Brands in '86, my first ever track side. And someone came off the top of Pallett Hill Bend. I think it might have been Terry Reimer, but he came off right in front of me, and I thought, I'll stick to watching. A bit crazy, which is great.
Well, Terry's another Kent boy, actually.
He
years ago,
about 18 months ago.
Yeah, when I was racing with Peugeot, they organised for a PR thing, because knowing I was a biker, so I got to ride his Suzuki 750 Superbike at Cadwell, and he drove the Peugeot touring car. The bad thing was it absolutely chucked it down with rain all day, and I definitely thought he had the better end of the deal, sort of getting in a car than riding the bike. But yeah, it was a great experience, and Terry's a good bloke, really good bloke.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good bloke. Yeah. He came on here for a chat recently as well. Well, last 18 months or so. Just quickly, I don't know if people saw my thing. James Toseland, the World Superbike Champion, he's been touring around the UK the last 10 or 11 days for an evening with, and went to the one in London, Shepherd's Bush. Fantastic. Great to see James. He's one of those guys who's good at everything.
Yeah, annoying, isn't it?
And he's a good-looking bloke as well, and it's really annoying.
Really annoying.
He's got to be bad at something.
Yeah.
But yeah, JT is a good lad. So yeah, great stuff. So yes, a bit safer four wheels, I guess, than the two. I guess the first time you got in the car and went racing with your brother, you thought, oh yes, I'll have a bit of this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun atmosphere, club karting, and but back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, it was actually a real hotbed of talent. Johnny Herbert was junior at Tilbury, London Kart Club, and there were a lot of other really quick guys that raced in sort of even at club level at that day. I mean, I started at club level there doing Tilbury Rye House, Shennington, Rissington, things like that, and then it grew into doing national 100 national championship. But karting was absolutely, it was great fun. We started off with a kart sort of on a roof rack of a Ford Escort, van, and that's how most people did it. If you had a transit van, you were flash, let alone a motorhome or an awning or anything else. It was so different then, so different, and arguably a lot better actually for it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's an issue that sort of comes up quite often, is certainly the price of karting. I mean, it's gone through the roof. I mean, a couple of years ago, we had Terry Fullerton on, who is like Mr. Karting almost, isn't he? He's right over there in the centre. And he says that he actually hates having to charge what he has to charge because of everything is just going up now, the cost of everything. And that in turn is pricing some young karters out of things, which is a real shame, isn't it? Because it should be proper entry level for all, shouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely should. I mean, and karting shouldn't cost as much as it does. I mean, I can't get my head around the numbers. It's basically what was Formula 3 money to go and do a season of karting. It's crazy, and there's no way that's accessible, certainly on the serious ranks of karting, for anybody of a normal background. So, and it's not easy to get sponsorship for karting because you're really not offering anything in return. So it tends to be kids with wealthy dads, checkbook racing, which is not. I mean, there is karting for people who haven't got as much money, but it's not in the serious categories, unfortunately.
Yes, it's kind of it's like they're doing it for fun, isn't it? Really, there's no kind of real route through, but which is a shame. And we see some very talented young drivers having to stop, unfortunately, just because of cost and things like that, which is a shame. But obviously you went racing and you got the bug for it, and you had a bit of success, and you got and I guess the racing bug had well and truly bitten then. When did you start looking at cars? Because I read somewhere it was at Brands, wasn't it? There was a Formula 4 Champions of Brands was going on at that time, and you kind of wangled your way in.
Well, what happened was Ian Blackman, who ran Auriga Racing Services, which was a semi-factory Van Diemen team, and knew a lot of people locally in Kent, and I knew, and you sort of paths crossed. And so he knew I'd been doing quite well at this stage in karting, and he said, "Do you want to come and have a test in a Formula 4 car?" So I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I went down to Brands, never driven anything else, but jumped in a Formula Ford and immediately loved it, absolutely loved it. And obviously went well enough for Ian to think, right, I'm going to help you. And he sourced, in fact, it was from Graham Brazil, a 2-year-old chassis and a Van Diemen RF81. And loaned me an engine and basically gave me second-hand tyres that they'd used on the works team to enable me just to race locally. And with my dad and my brother sort of helping and a bit of help, technical help from Ian, we just literally rocked up and started doing a bit of Champion of Brands racing. Wow. I sold all the kart stuff I had immediately to sort of fund the rolling chassis. And that is literally how it started.
Wow. I love that. It was nice that there was that thing, that kind of series logo to you as well, which obviously was a huge help.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people living in the back end of Scotland or something obviously wouldn't have been able to do that kind of a thing. And you said that you loved it, and I guess you took to the Formula Ford car pretty quickly, because I mean, we've spoken to people who have gone from karting into Ginettas, and they kind of struggle with the role of the car and the depth perception sitting on one side, that kind of thing. I guess the Formula Ford was just another big go-kart type thing.
Yeah, I mean, back in those days, Formula Ford cars slid around a lot. You know, you'll see pictures of cars turning into paddock, you know, with a full lot slide on, and that was not uncommon. It wasn't slower to drive them with a bit of slide than keep it in a straight line. So the cars moved around a lot, which was similar to almost to karting a bit in the wet. And you know, I don't know why, but I clicked with it straight away. It felt very natural for me. And in those days also, there was no testing bans or anything like that. You could test anywhere all the time, and testing was cheap. So I used to tag along with Auriga Racing Services when they went around, you know, and get the mileage in. And it was cheap to do it. But you know, now there's no such thing as cheap testing. But it meant that I got some, you know, mileage fairly quickly in '83. The racing wasn't a problem because, you know, compared to karting, it's, you know, it's not a doddle, but you're used to racing in very close proximity in karting, so that wasn't a thing. It was just getting used to the car, but I clicked with it very quickly.
Yeah, which is great. Just very quickly, something that's piqued my concern here, my interest. Henry Smith, hello Henry, has just commented. He says, "Great to hear about the early days of your career in the karting days. A certain Mr. Weatherly speaks very highly of you."
No, bless you.
I'm gonna have to push you on that. I feel like I should know who Mr. Weatherly is.
That's Richard Weatherly, who raced at when I was racing in karting. He was a very professional driver and did it. In fact, everything Richard did, he did very well. But he was one of the guys I really looked up to, you know, as being sort of doing the job properly, and learned quite a bit off him. But yeah, he was an excellent karter.
Yeah, lovely. Good to hear that. And it's obviously still thinks highly of you, which is lovely. So yes, Formula Ford, you've gone racing, done Champions of Brands. Things like progressed a little further onto there. I guess you were looking down the single-seater ladder as perhaps something you could turn into a career if things fell right.
I honestly wasn't. Because of my background with my parents. I literally saw it as a bit of sport, you know, as a sport. My natural competitive instincts obviously drove me on, you know, quite strongly, and obviously a modicum of talent as well. But you know, I'd never thought at that stage of it as a career. I really didn't. It only suddenly got serious very quickly after the festival in '83.
Yes.
When which was a pivotal moment in my career, and everyone has them, but that was a real pivotal moment. So I was still racing with a novice cross on the back of the car.
Wow.
There were 283 entries that year. 283. Get your head around that. That shows you how big Formula Ford was back in the day.
And it shows the draw of the festival. Because obviously I got into motorsport 3 or 4 years later, and from a very young age, the Formula Ford Festival was a big thing.
It was a big thing because Formula Ford was a category all over the world, so people came from all over the world to do the festival. And you know, without boring you with the details, I was in a 2-year-old car, and every 14 were knocked out, and the heat started on Thursday. Anyway, cut long story short, I got through to the final, and I finished 7th in the final, still with a novice cross on my back, and it just got the attention of a few journalists, and I got nominated for the Daily Express Austin Rover Metro Challenge Scholarship, which was a scholarship in Metro Challenge for the following year. And that was, I mean, Metro Challenge was effectively like Clio Cup of its day, if you like.
Yeah.
Or TCR Minis. It was sort of preeminent one-make series for small saloons. And anyway, I won the scholarship against 5 other guys. at Silverstone, having never even raced at Silverstone before in my life. But I won the scholarship, and that was the first time that, because of the link with Austin Rover and the Daily Express, and it was a paid-for drive, it gave me the inkling that actually there was a possibility to turn this into something a bit more serious. I was rubbing shoulders with Steve Soper and Jeff Allen and the works Austin Rover drivers, Tony Pond in rallying, and it just gave me this little insight to what professional motorsport was all about.
Yeah. Kind of gave you a look at what kind of could be, especially given that you'd now had your foot in the door. And it's just lovely hearing from people who raced in the Formula Ford Festival, because every single person has said that it did them a whole lot of good. Even if they didn't do very well in it, they said it just got them noticed that little bit more, which was fantastic. Excuse me. And you carried on doing Formula Ford, but it all came to a bit of a shuddering halt, didn't it? Was it 86?
Yeah, I mean, I did the Metro Challenge, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I was trying to find a way back into single seaters, which I did through Istel, which was part of Austin Rover, British Leyland IT Systems, and I got them to sponsor me to do a full year with Quest, which was back with Ian Blackman in '86. To do both British Championships, which was what I always dreamed of, really. But it all went peak-tong at the very first meeting at Silverstone with a big crash and smashed ankles. So, hence the the end of my single-seater career.
Yes, which is, I guess, in a way, it's a good thing that it happened early, because if you'd gone really well and had loads of success, it might have been a real blow. Thinking, look, I'm on the way up here, and
I'll be honest with you, I would never have made it all the way as a single-seater driver. I know I wouldn't. I'll say, in that stage of my life, maybe it would have got better. I wasn't what I would have called an exceptional driver. I was good,
right.
Maybe very good, and on the day, maybe beat everybody. But the real exceptional drivers, are very special. And I don't think I had the experience in the background, and I don't think I probably would. I certainly didn't have the financial resources. In those days, it was a very straightforward step from Formula Ford to Formula Ford 2000 to F3 to Formula 3000, as it was then, F2 now. But I didn't have the money or the connections, I don't think, to have followed that through. And I was lucky enough to do some other single-seater racing later on in life, and even race Formula 3000 at Donington, British Formula 3000 race. But it wouldn't have been for me. But I still love, I love single-seaters. They're just the purest form of racing car that there is. In fact, I went to the F1 exhibition at XL yesterday.
Okay.
And it's a brilliant exhibition. Everyone should go if you get the chance. It's really good. But it's a great insight into the technical and detail of Formula One throughout the ages, actually. But it's the purest form of motorsport, for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. I think most of us started watching single-seaters, Formula One, and things like that. I certainly did.
Yeah.
And then everything else kind of slotted in around it. But obviously, bad accident, injury, recuperation. I spoke with Gary Ailes. He had something similar, didn't he? He damaged himself fairly badly in.
His was but a flesh wound, really. It was.
Well, yeah, he milking it.
he was actually my teammate at Quest that year, and he always says that I was hamming it up and that I was delaying the restart of the race. So I'm just getting my own back on him there, but
absolutely right.
Yeah, he was teammate. We were teammates then.
Yeah. I mean, he said, he went similar kind of situation. He went kind of did a bit of single seater because he wanted to prove that he could still do it to himself, and then he went down the touring car route as you did. Excuse me. Obviously, difficult recuperation from that kind of a thing. I mean, I've only broken one ankle once, and that was bad enough. So two must have been awful, and the mental side of it as well. But it kind of it just shifted your focus, because I guess the injuries meant that you couldn't really race single seaters anyway.
I spent 7 months recuperating. You've got both ankles were shattered. The left one into a trillion pieces. If it hadn't been for the orthopedic surgeon down at the London hospital, and some lucky instances, my brother was a doctor. He was a doctor, and he was actually running the intensive care unit at the London hospital, which of course was where Professor Watkins came from, and where Jonathan Palmer trained. And there was a very good orthopedic surgeon there who'd worked on several racing drivers' ankles, actually. So when I had my accident, my brother got me transferred down there. And from going from Northampton General, where they wanted to amputate my left foot, he actually saved my foot. And obviously, I'm eternally grateful. But, that wouldn't have happened without the intervention, I don't think, of my brother. The ironic thing about it was he was actually looking after Sir Frank Williams, who'd had his car accident in Paul Ricard, and my brother so my brother was looking after him in the intensive care unit, and I was in the orthopedic ward down the hall. So
wow,
yeah,
crikey,
just coincidence in life, really. But it saved my foot. But yeah, I mean, I had 7 months of not really being able to do anything because you have to learn to walk again. It's not like you can hop around on one leg because both legs are up in stirrups. So I had to learn to walk again and everything. And I just didn't have the articulation in my ankles. I still don't to this day. The left one is virtually fused and doesn't move beyond 90 degrees. The right one's not too bad, but it's still only sort of 80% of full movement. But there was no way I was going to drive a single-seater car again, at that point. So Istel, who was still behind me, said, look, we're involved with Austin Rover. We could put you in a Rover Vitesse. That would, work out. So in '87, I was back in a car in a Rover Vitesse, and I was actually the youngest driver on the grid in touring cars. So
yeah, I didn't know that until I did a bit of research in the last few days. Firstly, big old lump of a car. I remember the Rover Vitesse. I think it was that year or the year later. I remember Dennis Leach had one in the Demon Tweaks one, and he went backwards into the barrier at Thruxton. And I remember it was just a brilliant looking car, but it's quite a shift from Formula 4 to that, isn't it? I mean, did it take a bit of getting used to, or?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, it didn't. I mean, I'd like to consider myself a very versatile driver. My sort of heroes back in racing, whether it was Graham Hill, Jim Clark, they drove everything. They drive a single seat, a Cortina, or a single seat, whatever. So for me, it was, and a lot of my contemporaries as well, it didn't seem unusual to drive a lot of different cars. And obviously there was no data logging or analysis back in those days. So you had to have it in a get on the pace quickly. But the Rover was a big cuddly giant of a car anyway. And it was an easy car to get on top of. Well, at least I thought it was anyway. So, I still got a soft spot for that car, actually. It was a lovely car.
Yeah. And for those of us who weren't in the car, looking in from the outside, it was a brilliant looking thing as well, white with the light blue and the state. Yeah, very cool looking car.
My car was actually the Andy Rouse 84 championship winning car.
Oh, was it?
Which had then been campaigned by Peter Hall from Industrial Control Services, his sponsor. And we bought it from Andy when he moved on to the Mercure project, which was the forerunner to Cosworths and RS 500s. But we bought it off him because we figured it would do the trick, and it did.
Yeah, well, it certainly did. Just in a comment here, Vitalda Marashevska, she said a mate of mine used to rally a Vitesse / SD1. Not sure who'd have called it a cuddly bear of a car, though. Nothing's a cuddly bear when you're rallying it. I mean,
no, I was going to say.
Goodness me, fair play to him. But yeah, I mean, did you have any expectations going into the season as a complete, like rookie in touring cars? I mean, or were you just thinking, let's go and see what we can do?
Yeah, I mean, you ask any driver who's got the competitive instinct, and he's not there to make up the numbers. So yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I was trying to put one over on all the established touring car races, Andy Rouse and everybody else, and try and make a name for myself. So for me, it was the most natural instinct in the world to sit on the grid and try and win the race. And I mean, the car was a good car. John Maguire prepared it well. It was generally the quickest Rover Vitesse out there, and that was proof pudding that we won the class. We won Class A that year in '87, which was as good as you could do back then. So yeah, I mean, I was pretty chuffed with that, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, that second race of the season, I mean, was it Alton Park? You went out and won the race in your second race in touring cars. Your first touring car finish was at the very front. Must have some fond memories of that day, winning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to win your first touring car race, with the sort of awareness of it, even at that stage, was fantastic. An introduction to the world of TV and interviews and everything else. It was quite a high profile thing, nothing like what it became, obviously. And coming back from my accident the year before, very satisfying to think that you could still do it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And get to the front and win, which is lovely. All people are just talking about, there's the XD Supercar Vitesse is at the Silverstone Museum still, which is in there, which is very cool. So your car's in there, which is good to see. People are talking about tyre stacks and track limits. Yeah, we'll come to that, folks. We'll come to that. Don't worry. We'll come to that.
Oh, that's it. I said no topic was off menu, so I don't have a problem talking about it.
I'm surprised it's taken half an hour, folks. Yeah. But that season, obviously, it was the classes system where the class victory counted as an overall victory.
For the overall championship, yeah.
Silly old thing. Even John Cleland, he doesn't count his first one because he said that.
Well, I never counted it anyway.
No. John. But without that, you would have won the championship because you were the top Class A runner. You won the most races.
Definitely, yeah.
It was a very, very good start. But we've got to talk about '98 because my favourite touring car in the history of ever, shows my age, because everyone always picks a super touring car. RS 500 every time, absolutely love it. I've spoken to a few guys on here who have driven. I've had Jerry Marnie's been on here, Steve's been on. Sean Walker's been on, Rob Gravitt's been on, Carl Jones has been on. It's an absolute belter. I absolutely love it. What was your first experience of getting in the car? Because everyone has just said, even Gary Owers, when he drove it at Donington the first time, he put his foot down in the pits, nothing happened, and 3 seconds later, he was almost in the pit wall.
Yeah, that's right. the lag on them was terrible.
Yeah. Was it just a crazy car to drive? Because they look brilliant, they sound brilliant. It must have been great to drive it.
Oh, they were fantastic. They were absolutely fantastic. And obviously they developed very, very quickly from the very first ones. And the power went up and everything else got better. But they were just there aren't many cars that people standing on the pit wall take a step back when they sort of come close to the wall. But the RS 500 was one of those cars. If people stood standing on the pit wall at Silverstone when you came through the old Woodcote would take a step back. If they were on the pit wall at Alton Park and you came over Deer Leap and out towards the pit wall, I mean, it was quite, visually and physically quite shocking because you could feel the power and the noise of those machines. And that's what inspired the public, a car that looked savage. Isn't it?
It was a fabulous car. I mean, I'll come to it in a minute. I actually saw one. I saw you guys racing the following year. But one thing I was asking about, you had the Labatt sponsorship. Or was that? It was '88, wasn't it? You had the Labatt sponsorship, iconic looking car. I did want to ask you. You did one race that year for Andy Rouse in the Cam Shipping car, another brilliant looking car. I've always wondered, because as I said, I've spoken with Jerry and a few others, and they said Andy was great, a brilliant engineer, but he never gave everyone the full beans for his customers. He always kind of held something back in the engine, things like that. I always wondered, how different was your car for the season compared to the Andy Rouse one that you raced? Was it Donington? I can't remember where it was, but
yeah, I mean, you've got your dates slightly wrong because the Labatt's deal was actually 89 and 90.
89 is the following year, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's the following year for 2 years. I mean, look, the Cam shipping car, which was Lawrence Bristow's car, was a customer car anyway. Nobody else ever got to drive the Caliber cars, and if we had, we wouldn't have known where the secret buttons were to have the extra turbo power anyway. I genuinely think that the cars were very, very similar, but Andy always had a bit more power. He just always had a bit more power. Ran the customer cars, the Bats cars as well, just a little bit safer, both from a sort of workload issue for themselves and also to give himself that little competitive advantage. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. So I have got the Bats. I've got my dates wrong, you see. But one other thing as well, I mentioned Jerry Marley. He actually won the first ever touring car race that I ever watched, that 88 Silverstone. He's a character. We all know. For those who may or may not know, he's a bit of controversy with Vic Lee, and we'll come to that. But a brilliant guy. He'd been away from motorsport for a while, and he came back on here last year, early this year, which was brilliant. What did you think of him when he rocked up Silverstone? Obviously, Andy had his turbo issue, but what did you think of him? Rocked up in his Arquati RS 500, stuck it on pole, I think it was, and won the race. You must have thought, how's this guy?
Well, we knew him anyway because he raced production saloons. Because a lot of us all did production saloons. Rob Gravitt, myself, Jerry, we all did production saloons in Sierra Cosworths. Yeah. So we actually all knew each other very well anyway. So we knew what a character and a hard charging driver Jerry was. And in fact, he put together a very, very good deal with Roger Dowsett, who was an ace preparer. He'd actually been the Austin Rover factory. Prepared my MG Metro when I started, so I knew Roger. Actually, Jerry put a really good deal together, and he hit the ground running in '88. So it possibly didn't come as a surprise, but we all knew him around the paddock. Great character, great fun guy to go out with. Always a laugh, but actually, I don't think he got the credit for his driving that he probably deserved.
Absolutely right, and he's quite instrumental with the TV deal, wasn't he? The grandstand and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's good. I was going to say he was a good businessman, but that could be misconstrued. It could be misconstrued, but he was a great ideas man, and he had a lot, had a lot of input into what was going on with the championship then.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever get in a helicopter with him? Because no, good.
But I got into road cars with him quite often, and that was pretty scary, I can tell you.
I'll bet. No, great guy. Speaking of helicopters, actually, just come on to 89. Lawrence Bristow, helicopters in the family. Haven't heard from Lawrence at all while I've been doing this. He seems to have disappeared off the map. The Labatt's car, though, flying it in over London, suspended from a helicopter. Don't see that in the BTCC these days. We need more of that. Yeah, we need more of that kind of thing. To be fair, actually, I would say that Napa Racing have really lifted the level of sponsorship and how it's leveraged and what they do. As a partner, I think Napa have been fantastic for raising awareness in the championship. It's a sort of PR stunt they would absolutely do. The reason that deal came about was because CSS, the marketing agency in London, which was run by Andy Marriott and his cohorts, they actually did the Labatt's deal. So they put together this launch, obviously flying it underneath a Bristow helicopter down the Thames. It's great. I mean, the picture is insane, isn't it? It's ridiculous. Yeah. If it wasn't done in 1989, you'd think it was AI. You'd think that's not. Yeah. That didn't happen.
Yeah, I'd love to know what the insurance angle was on that, because it was actually the genuine car. It wasn't a sort of mock-up or anything, or a cardboard cutout. It was the actual car.
I mean, you'd think a mock-up might have been a bit easier to pull off. But it was fantastic looking. It's a fantastic thing. I just want to comment from Mandy Gravitt. Hello, Mandy. She said that you had a lot of fun times with Jerry and you guys, which is lovely.
Yeah, we did.
Lovely to hear. Just want to let's have a quick talk about the Labatt's car, because 89 was pretty strong. It was the year that Andy and Rob were very, very good, and Andy obviously, and then Rob went and did his thing with Yokohama in 1990 and just drove away from everyone. Obviously, you were in the car to be in, but I guess with those guys doing what they were doing, did it ever get frustrating being behind those guys? Because obviously Andy was
hugely frustrating. Yeah, it was hugely frustrating because you know, on one hand, I was always at a bit of a disadvantage to Andy because he would always have a little bit more power than our cars. And then on the other hand, we felt like we were obviously at a disadvantage against the Yokohamas that Rob and Mike Smith had on the Trackstar cars. So, you know, you were always fighting a little bit with one hand behind your back. But like I said, as a driver, you sit on the grid and always think you could make the difference. And generally what would happen was, you know, I would live with them for a few laps before the tyres went off, or, you know, from overdriving, basically, trying to keep up. But, you know, look, we had our moments and won races, and it was a great era to be part of. But yeah, it's, you know, you can't always in racing have the best of everything. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But it was, there was definitely an element of frustration there. Yeah,
I'm sure, because obviously it kind of was the car to have, and it went on to dominate the series. But
yeah,
I guess when you got those guys doing what they're doing, you kind of can't quite keep tabs on them. I did see, actually, while we're on the subject, I did see a comment from Glenn Goodwin, Facebook. Evening, Glenn. He said, it sounds like somewhere your old Labatt's RS 500 is up for sale somewhere.
It is. Yeah, it's up for sale. I mean,
are you going to have a cheeky bid? Glenn's asking.
I wish. I mean, every time it comes up for sale, somebody sends me a message and tells me it's for sale. And I've known a lot of the previous owners. The reason that car is so special is that at the end of 1990, when Group A got finished, Lawrence Bristow owned both the Labatt's cars, his and my cars. And they were both sent down to his home in Cranfield, down near Guildford, and they sat in his garage with his other cars. And one of the Rouse guys used to go down every sort of 6 months and fire them up and warm them up and just run them through. So they didn't turn a wheel initially, and after the end of the season in 1990, and then Lawrence transformed his car into Thunder Saloon car with big arches and all the rest of it, and sort of effectively bastardized the car. But all that time, mine just sat there as it had finished.
Wow.
And then at one point, I was actually offered the car for 22.5 grand. I wish I'd bought it then. But it went through a whole series of owners, you know, right up to the present. I mean, I was lucky enough to drive it when it was owned by Martin Johnson for a Duke video, and then Paul Smith owned it, and we actually raced it 2 or 3 times, which was fantastic. And then he sold it, and it's been through various hands, but it's back up for sale again.
Yeah, crikey.
But it's outside of my budget. It's way outside of my budget. It really is. But I would love to own it. I would absolutely love to own it.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. And just on the subject of RS500s, if anyone on Facebook or anywhere wants to check out Paul Linfoot Racing, work he does with RS500s, absolutely sensational.
He is the man for RS500. Yeah, he absolutely is.
Yeah,
in fact, he bought the overalls that I wore when I won the Macau Grand Prix in Watson's colours. And I sold them I found them in the attic, and I sold them to Paul for his collection. He's got the most incredible memorabilia collection.
It's amazing, isn't it? He put it on the socials, and yeah, he's a great guy. And Paul's been through a sort of rough time, and he's on the way back up, which is great to see. So wishing all the best.
And he's got my Labatt's overalls as well, and original helmet. So he's got
fantastic.
Yeah, it's quite a few bits.
He's got a little Tim Harvey shrine going on in his little tribute corner, which is lovely. I'm just on that subject.
Steve Soper's his hero. Steve Soper's his hero.
Well, yes.
He would have Steve's babies if he could.
I won't saying this. Super Touring Power, the first one. He had. I think it was the actual chassis, the old Mexico chassis that he had done in the Bastos livery. And you can see even now he's making doe eyes at Steve. He's still and rightly so, the guys in Edmonton, but fair enough.
Right. Yeah, quite right too.
Just on that subject, Mark O'Neill, evening Mark, on Facebook, he said, do you have any cars? Do you own any of the cars that you've raced at all?
Sadly not. I mean, every time I sort of, go see a Super Touring or a Super race or the Super Touring weekend, and there's, Tim Harvey's old Peugeot, Tim Harvey's old RS 500, there's this, that, and the other, and I think, I don't own any of those cars. They're all out there. I mean, my actual BMW Championship winning car is out in Australia and New Zealand, and races out there. So that's out there. But no, I don't own any of my old race cars, sadly.
Yeah, crikey. One day. Excuse me. One day. Glenn Goodwin is saying he needs to dig a bit deeper under the cushions of the sofa. Yeah, a few more pennies down there. Absolutely. Right, we're going to come on to 92 very shortly. I do want to talk about the win you had at Thruxton. I think it was 89, I think it was. It must have been 89. You won at Thruxton. It was my first ever live BTCC weekend. I went there.
Oh, wow.
Because Thruxton's about 40 minutes kind of that way for me. And I remember you winning in the RS 500. Wow. And that was the first time. And I remember I was on the bank at Allard, up on the banking there, just at the end of the pit lane. And the first time when you guys came off the grid and came thundering past, I remember just feeling the ground move. It was just... Yeah. It was an incredible sight seeing the RS 500s and the M3s and all that and the Rovers, and it was a fantastic day. That was kind of burned onto my memory, and you won. So there we go.
Oh, well, good stuff. Yeah,
happy days. Right, okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, right. So one thing I need to talk about as well before we go to BMW is the Birmingham Super Prix. I loved it. Anyone who remembers watching it loved it. Most of the drivers loved it. Apart from Frank Sittner, who binned it. Yeah. What did you think of it?
I mean, it was fun, actually. It was billed as the Monaco of the North, yes. And they had all this great billing. And then we were in this, the paddock was in the fruit and vegetable market, surrounded by rotten fruit and veg, and stank to high heaven. And we sort of looked at each other and thought, really, this is the Monaco of the North? But the actual track was really good.
That was on Bristol Street, wasn't it? The original Bristol Street Motors, wasn't it?
Yeah. But the actual track was great. It was really fun. You had the real fast section down the bull ring. You then had obviously the slight Nadgery section towards the end of the lap. It was really fun to drive. The cars were quick. There's a legendary story about how they set up a speed trap for the Formula 3000 cars, and then found that the touring cars with the RS 500s were quicker down the straight, doing 180 odd mile an hour. And it was great fun. I mean, everybody's seen the YouTube video, which is up there. So, it sort of gives people I wish there were more actual of the Group A races on YouTube. Maybe there are, maybe I haven't seen them, but I'm constantly asked about the Birmingham Super Prix because I think it's one that people have seen a lot of on YouTube. But it was really good fun. It was great fun.
Yeah, I do remember watching it as a kid, thinking this is absolutely brilliant. I think it's where my love of street circuits came from. I love a street circuit, and I think it.
Yeah, and I love a street circuit. I've always really enjoyed street circuits and gone well on street circuits. I'd actually really like them.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone just said, Keith Mail, evening Keith, said, Rich, I'd have been at that Thruxton meeting too. Where were you watching from? Standing at Allard with the RS 500s coming off the grid was exactly as you described. Yep, that's it. We were probably standing a few feet from each other, Keith. Small world. Did any of the Super Prix races finish without a major stoppage? No, I don't think they did.
No.
There was always something, and there was an F3000 car punched a hole in the wall, didn't it? And I forget the driver.
Yeah.
He was still in it, and they were craning him away. He was still in it. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Was it Russell Spence? No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. Yeah, Russell Spence. Yeah, he's in there, kind of waving, saying, "I'm still in, guys, down."
He wanted them to give him a push start so he could carry on, and they wouldn't.
Well, yeah. Yeah, absolutely amazing. No, great, a great circuit. We've got fond memories for those of us old enough. Yes, Marion Speed. It was Russell Spence. Thank you, Marion. Okay, right. Got to move on. 1991. Good old Vic Lee. Obviously makes headlines for various reasons. But I think what gets overlooked is that he does run a very, very, very good team. You switched to, was it you and Labatt and everything went to BMW M3. Again, a fantastic car. Absolutely brilliant looking car. Slightly different from the RS 500.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone on record as saying it was, initially quite disappointing because it was the first real year of 2 litre.
Yeah.
So the cars were pretty underpowered, really. Bearing in mind that these cars were running 2.3s and then latterly 2.5s in Germany and DTM. So a sort of 2 litre version was a little bit breathless. But, the chassis was fantastic. So it was a complete opposite from the Sierra because, the Sierra was making all of its time on the straights, and basically you were sort of scrabbling through the corners and getting on the power as soon as you could get some traction and launch it out the corner. Whereas the BMW was pretty slow on the straights, and then you drove it like crazy in the corners to keep momentum up and gain your lap time there. So you had to work on, as a driver technique, it was very different. It was all about, your corner speed. And of course, the chassis was really good. So it was a change of style, change of way of racing, and a very different car to the RS 500. But again, one that, I adapted to very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that would actually count for the next thing I was going to mention. I remember that first race of the season. I remember seeing you finish 10th, and I thought, really? Because
he's lost it. He's lost it.
What's happened? Where's he gone? He was normally at the front last time, and obviously that will explain. Because obviously that was at Silverstone, which is fast circuit, not as many corners, and obviously that was the issue with the BMW, which is good. We could absolutely put that one on the car for sure. One thing I didn't remember this, but I saw in the research you got disqualified at Donington for noise regulations. Do you remember what happened there?
That was a sort of
too loud.
Yeah, too bloody loud. It was
like stupid. In case you wake the planes up.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was a messy thing. They noise tested the first 3 cars, and stupidly I won the race and got thrown out. Whereas I can't remember who it was. Somebody finished 3rd and deliberately dropped back to 4th, so they didn't get noise tested. I can't remember how it worked, but It was. It was very frustrating. We were repacking the exhausts every time the car went out, but it just blew all the packing straight out. So that was a bit frustrating.
Yeah, I've just seen a comment here. I vaguely remember this. Do you remember Roger Dowson's team dressing up as St. George and arriving on the grid in a van and fighting the Listerine Dragon at Donington?
That's it. Yeah, that's something we got back to. That's what we got.
That was surreal.
Yeah. That was
amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, that year in '91, obviously, you got a few top 5s and a few podiums and things like that. But obviously, Will Hoy, God bless him. He won the championship that year. He was your kind of teammate in the Vic Lee kind of stable there. Obviously, it was nice to see Will win because he was a good guy and lovely chap. Again, it must have been a bit frustrating though because you had the same car and it was just it just didn't quite fall right that year, did it?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first year. I mean, Vic had run the cars very competitively, and we were the customer team. It was my first year with Vic. We were the customer team. We were the paying customer because Labatt's via Lawrence Bristow. We were the paying team. So we weren't treated quite the same way that Will's car, which was fair enough. But what you're forgetting is I actually won the last race of the year.
Yes.
So that was an important one because it was a precursor to, if you like, Vic believing I was good enough to be in the team proper for the next year. So I would say it was frustrating, and Will was such a fabulous guy. I'd know Will from Group C racing as well because
Yes, you've done.
You know, we haven't talked about Group C, but Group C was, you know, one of my big loves. In fact, the picture over my shoulder of racing at Le Mans. But yeah, Group C was one of my big loves. So I knew Will from Group C racing in Le Mans. But you know, so you could never say you weren't.
Yeah.
One.
Oh, there we are. Sorry, there's a bit of a freeze there. But yeah, it was.
What's that?
Yeah.
My lovely wife has just brought me a cup of tea, so forgive me.
Top draw stuff. Yeah, I'll come to Group C very, very quickly. But yeah, that last win at Silverstone, it was the last ever win for the M3, which is a very nice thing to have. And as you say, it kind of.
And that car's out there as well racing. I should own that one.
That's one that you need to get that one. If anyone knows where that is.
Yeah, well, I've driven that. I drove it actually for a feature we did. You might remember a couple of years back at Brands. Yeah, with Colin Turkington, and we swapped cars, did all that. Yeah.
Fantastic, brilliant car. Just quickly, what we got here? You need a slice of cake to go with the tea. Absolutely.
I do, actually.
You need a bit of cake to go with the tea. Yeah.
Right. Can I have a mini roll?
If only you could pass mini rolls through a camera. I could just go for one of them. Just very quickly, you mentioned about like Group C, because you'd done a bit of what is now British GT and the Group C kind of thing, and you did Le Mans. It's probably a good time to mention it before we come on to 92, which I know everyone's waiting for. 80.
People are saying that I should have a piece of cake with my cup of tea, and I wonder if there was a mini roll left. Oh, you've eaten them all. Oh. Was it the trick or treaters? Sorry. Christmas cake. Right, we've sorted that one.
Right, that's the important stuff.
Yeah.
Come on, this is
forget the motorsport. What was the question?
So about like Le Mans 1987. Obviously, we love sports cars. I mean, my favourite sports car, the Sauber C9, the Mercedes Sauber C9. I spoke with Kenny Atchison on here. He's kind of built one of his own. Fantastic time to do some sports car racing. You went to Le Mans 87, and Tiger, was it the Tiger 87?
88.
88 was it? 88.
Yeah, it was this car. It was the Tiger Porsche. So it was Tiger chassis with a Porsche 956 engine in it, run by Charles Ivey, the London Porsche dealer, who was heavily into his racing.
Yes.
I actually won the British sports car championship, which was for Group C in 88 and 89. First, with a Tiger and then with a Spice. But it was, getting to Le Mans. Thank you. Was I've talked about it a lot, but 88 was, you had no chicane, so you had the full long straight.
It was the proper Mulsanne.
Yeah, the proper Mulsanne. You had the old pit garages. So very. I thought the race. I fell in love with the race straight away. It was fantastic. And I've been doing some world sports car racing with Charles Ivey alongside doing touring cars.
Yes.
Back to the sort of versatility thing. So I've already been doing quite a bit of that. And that car was actually very competitive at Le Mans because of the engine. It was blisteringly quick down the straight because it was a C2 car, so a smaller car, less frontal area, but effectively with a C1 engine in it. So that did 235 mile an hour down the Mulsanne straight.
Oh, so, that would get your attention.
Yeah.
Just actually on the subject of this, I did see earlier on. I'm not going to scroll up, but I saw like Mike Wilds was tuning in. So hello, Mike. I hope you're well. We all know Mike's love for Le Mans and the cars that he's raced there. I think it might have been Mike who I spoke to. He said that he enjoyed. He always wanted to get like the dawn sunrise kind of shift at Le Mans. Now I spoke with Karen Chandog. He said it was great because the fans were just waking up and they were absolutely brilliant and they were there and they were ready for the for the last day of racing. I think Mike said he enjoyed it because he could smell the bacon from the barbecues. Right. Did you ever get that kind of sunrise dawn at Le Mans experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in actual fact, the first year I did it, because I was the lead driver in the car, I got to do the best qualifying. I did the qualifying, new soft tyres. I did the qualifying run. I started the race. I did the session into the evening. I did a session during the night. I did the dawn session, and I finished the race. So I did absolutely all the best sessions of the event. That didn't always happen in subsequent years, but it's a wonderful experience. And I mean, 88 was the year, obviously, Silk Cut Jaguar won.
Yes.
So it was a massive, motorsport event. And I remember finishing the race with all the marshals waving the flag and a huge lump in my throat, which isn't something that happened very often in a race car. It was a very emotional moment. It just has the way of getting to you, that race does. It's a special event.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've not been, even as fans, it's just, there's something about Le Mans. It's like the Indy 500. It's just a special thing. And for you guys racing in it, I can only imagine how much more that's magnified. And obviously you got the class podium, so you got to go be on the podium in the class. When you're on the podium, standing up on that Le Mans podium, do you think, oh, this is pretty cool?
Yeah, well, I mean, that right then, what I wanted more than anything was a factory Group C drive, and off the back of it, I got an offer from Spice to race in the factory team in the full World Sports Car Championship for the following year. And I can tell you that the deal was 70 grand for the year, for a full, which is crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely nothing. I mean, it was effectively a sponsored drive, but I didn't have 70 grand any more than I had 20 grand or 10 grand. But I signed the deal on the basis that I was going to underwrite it and find the money from sponsors. And I actually found most of it, but I still ended up paying some of it myself. But it was, what I hoped was going to be my ticket into Group C. And I absolutely love those cars. The Group C1 cars with the 3.5 litre F1 engines were just unbelievable. And it was the, 89, 90 was the absolute prime time for Group C, the Silk Cut Jaguars, the Nissans, the Sauber Mercedes, the Porsches. It was incredible. And, Spice were always the underdog. But I actually quite like that because we all like to be the underdog anyway. Yeah. And, we could race those cars absolutely flat out. Unlike the turbo cars, because there was a fuel allowance and they had to just back it off a little bit. And so we were always the giant killers. And I mean, I remember, I finished 4th at Spa-Francorchamps in a World Sports Car Championship. You look at the names on the result sheet. We finished 3rd on the podium at Donington, our home race. And they were very, very special moments for me. But of course, this was in parallel to touring cars taking off, and ironically, it was touring cars actually that became, if you like, the professional career rather than Group C.
Yeah.
Anyway, happy Christmas, everybody. I've got some Christmas cake there.
Happy early Christmas, everyone.
It's begun. Run out of mince pies.
Folks, go and get your tinsel, go and get your decorations. The Hard Compound and Tim Harvey say it's Christmas. Let's go. Let's do it. But yes, I mean, I can actually see how you fell in love with those cars. I mean, I did. I was 8, 9 years old, and it's a fantastic era. But obviously, touring cars was taking off, and obviously with BMW and everything. And just to get back to the touring cars, firstly, guys, I have seen the comments and the questions. I am going to come to them. Don't worry. 92, obviously there was a new car with BMW. Vic Lee was doing, he was in like the main, the main BMW team man.
Sorry, Rich, you froze there for a minute. So I didn't hear the start of that.
He froze, that's all right, no problem. 92, obviously Vic Lee and 92 and the was it the 318, wasn't it? The new car.
New car.
I guess with a new car, there's always sort of teething problems, and you think, "Oh, what's going to go here? Is it going to go well?" How different was it to the M3 when you got into it the first time?
It wasn't substantially different. It really wasn't substantially different. It was slightly different, but not substantially. But did you say you've had Steve on this program?
Yeah, Steve came on 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so he would have explained the sort of technical development of the car.
Yes.
And in fairness, Steve was clearly the guy with more experience than anyone else. He was leading the development on the car with Vic, and I was just the beneficiary of that knowledge and that benefit. I could give feedback, of course, but he had far more knowledge technically than I did. And I think without him, we probably wouldn't have got on top of that situation. Bearing in mind that ProDrive were running the same car and never got it really figured out. So I think Steve was really crucial in that development of the car side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure Steve would agree, and he'll probably say that as well. But it was. I was just going to comment on YouTube about the car. I mean, and it ties in nicely with what I've got here. It was a fairly slow start. Obviously, John Cleland and Will Hoy were often running from the start in the Vauxhall and the other car. Fairly slow start, but bagging points and stuff. But then, what clicked? Was it Knock Hill, wasn't it? I think you took second and first or something like that up at Knock Hill in the middle of the season. And the question was, what did Vic Lee change on the car to make it more competitive? Because it was a marked difference in the second half of the season. Yeah,
it was. Well, I'm sure Steve would have told you this. It was basically flexing in the rear arms that was changing the geometry of the car. And as soon as we braced that up and stopped the movement in deflection in the wheel angle effectively from the rear arm bit, then we had a consistent chassis, and then we could get the results out of it. In any car, there's always one weak link in terms of what's stopping you go faster. And a driver has to sort of always analyze, well, what is it I can't do with this car that's making it go quicker? Setup issue or anything like that. It was rear arms were flexing and effectively just destroying your geometry mid corner all the time.
Okay. And obviously that got that obviously got sorted to a point at Knock Hill.
As soon as that was fixed, we were then delivering our potential straight away. Yeah,
absolutely flying. Obviously, and there was backing from BMW as well, as we know. But I mean, honestly though, did you see those next 5 races coming? Because after Knock, I think you second at Knock Hill, then first, and then it was just win. Yeah. I mean, when you got that sorted out, the bracing issue, you must have felt invincible at that point.
Yeah. I think you always know in racing there are cycles when you see it in F1 now. Who thought that at the start of this year, when Red Bull were cleaning up, that they wouldn't carry on doing it all year?
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd all written the season off, hadn't we?
Exactly. So in racing that you have to make hay while the sun shines. But you also know it won't always last. But you have to take the opportunity when you do have it. And we once we fixed the car, because it was part of the way through the year, everybody else was almost running already at their optimum. Yeah. And we suddenly find this extra, bit, but you can't. It's very hard to react to that because. If you're John Cleland and you've been winning races and the car's great, because when you win the race, you pretty much say the car's fine anyway, don't you? You don't look for very much more. When suddenly someone goes quicker, it's really hard to find more pace in your car. And you start chasing a setup that actually probably doesn't work and might be worse than what you had before. So we caught them on the hop. We took advantage of it, and the momentum was with us. But back to that sort of, how does a racing driver think? You always think sitting on the grid that you can win the race. If you don't think that, you shouldn't be there. And okay, granted, there are times when you've got no bloody chance and you're trying to get the optimum result. But if you were in a competitive situation, you're going to make the most of it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I guess it happened the right way around that year. Also, with the improvement coming rather than starting well and falling off and chasing stuff, which which helps, I guess. And okay, it's time for a deep breath, folks, because Silverstone 92, we've got to talk about it. I've spoken to two people who have been involved in it, one week after the other. I've spoken with John, then spoke with Steve. And those two, we'll come to this in a minute. They'd forgotten about it 3 days later, and they still find it amazing that people like me rake it up every year. But firstly, you're in the title hunt. There's like 3 or 4 of you that can win it. You're on a great run. What happened in qualifying first? Because it was 12th. I mean, because you started 12th. I think was it Will was?
Yeah, basically we had mixed conditions and a drying track. I think it was a drying track or something. We basically didn't have the right tyres or didn't hook the time up when the track was at its best. So we all qualified effectively out of position. It wasn't that we were tugging round, and we were sort of pretty much trying to do what the other one did for fear of messing it up. So rather than take, gamble and change tyres and be, miles off, you did what the others did. So we ended up qualifying together.
Yes, it was all 3 of you were sort of in the midfield area, which obviously for us lot looking in was great because obviously it was all going to kick off at some point. Something was going to happen. And I guess sitting on the grid, even though you're 12th, you're thinking, right, let's go. We can, we can win this. It goes back to that mindset, doesn't it?
Well, actually, I mean, I this is why I always love BTCC Finals Day, because unless you've been in that fight, you can't understand what you go through as a driver. And I don't just mean on the day. I mean, in the whole build up to it. The fact that you've put yourself in with a chance of winning is the first thing. The next thing is that you desperately want to do everything right to capitalize on that opportunity. Yeah. So in the build up to that weekend, you're doing everything you possibly could do to maximize your chances. And that you've got the pressure of expectation from not just sponsors, but family, friends, everybody, and you also know there are also lots of things you can't control, like the weather or reliability. There's so many things that could screw your chances that the build-up of tension is unparalleled. There's a saying that it's hard enough to win a race, but it's damn near impossible to win a championship because it's really hard. So I always feel all of these things when we have like a situation we had this year going into Brand's BTCC final. But the key for me, and I've said this directly to every driver that is up for it, if you like, that it will be the man that wants it badly enough on the day that will win it. That is the only thing that matters. But you're not racing for the race win then. It's a totally different. So when we were sitting on the grid in 92, I'm not even thinking about. All I'm thinking about is outscoring the other 2 in points, regardless of where you finish. And that situation was completely mirrored this year in touring cars, which is what made it so fascinating. Exactly 30 years on from when it happened to me. So I was completely engrossed in each one of the title championship rivals' journey this year. And it could have gone so many different ways. Reflecting on this year, for me, it was very clear that Tom Ingram probably had a pace advantage in the dry. Yeah. And it looked like Jake was a little bit stressed and trying to find a way to get the championship done. And we all know that BMW has sometimes a very narrow operating window when it works in the wet to dry. Yes. And it just worked for him in that final race. And he felt it. He took advantage of it. He went out there and won that championship with that drive in that race. Yeah. And there was nothing Tom could do about it. It wasn't because Tom didn't want it as much. And it wasn't because rear-wheel drive cars had an advantage, because what people forget is that Ash Sutton buggered off into the distance and won that race in a front-wheel drive car.
I'm actually glad you mentioned Ash, because we saw what happened at Druids in race 1 when Josh locked up and said, I always think if that hadn't happened, it's all ifs and buts, but I think Ash could have. I mean, he was on it that day. I mean, the last.
He had nothing to lose. He had nothing to lose,
and he had the pace in the car. And I think,
yeah,
if he'd not been taken out in that first race, what a Sunday! Even better. It could have been even better. But it was fantastic, and you kind of say that is people don't seem to remember who won the last race of the season. I remember 2019 when Colin won, when Dan Camish had his issue. Jason Plato's last BTCC win. Tom Ingram won the championship. Or was it Tom Ingram in 2022? But Dan Lloyd won the last race, and people seem to forget who won because, as you say, you're just trying to outscore the other guy.
Yeah,
and that's where all the eyes are. But I mean, I guess in 92, you're kind of, you've prepared for it and you're in the zone. You're ready to, take advantage of anything that comes your way. You had a wingman, Mr. Soper, who'd been brought in. We'll come to that in a bit. But I mean, what a wingman to have. I mean, within the team, within the BMW team. Obviously, he came together with Rob Gravitt and stoved the back end of his car in. Where were you when that happened? And did you think, bugger, could have done without that?
Do you know, I can't remember at that point.
Because he had a spin and he backed in, didn't he? When Rob hit him.
I can't remember where I was then, actually on the track. But I mean, it wasn't as though we had some set plan before the race started, because bearing in mind where we were all starting,
there
was no plan that you could have. It was basically, you try and finish in front of the other two, and they would have had the same plan as well. So we couldn't orchestrate anything prior to, and obviously it just happened that Steve put in that incredible charge from having been spun round. I mean, the fact that he actually closed up that amount of track distance is staggering, just absolutely staggering. He was on an absolute mission. I think he was quite incensed because it was David Leslie, I think, that turned him round. Then Rob Gravitt hit him, but he thought Steve thought it was probably some Vauxhall conspiracy, but I don't think it was. It was just one of those things. But there's nothing faster than an angry man, is there? And in actual fact, I know the car looked terrible, but all the wheels were pointing in the right direction, and that was all fine.
It was fairly cosmetic, wasn't it? It
was cosmetic, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the boot stayed shut and things like that. Otherwise, you'd got black and orange flag. But of course, he got himself back into the frame, didn't he?
Yes, and you all ended up on a very similar bit of tarmac at the same time. And obviously, we've got to mention. I mean, a few comments are coming in already about Mr. Clennon going for first. He wasn't.
Yeah,
he was.
Bless old Murray. You've got to love Murray. That's such a classic, isn't it? He's going for first.
Wrong digit, Murray. It wasn't that one. But obviously, one thing I do remember, there was a move you had at Cops. You had to go for it, obviously, because you had to be, you had to get ahead of the guys, and you ran a bit wide, and Will ran wide, and John and Steve nipped through. I can't remember who was leading who at the time, but obviously you were then thinking, right, okay, this is it. Do it or get off the pot time, I guess.
Well, I mean, when I was obviously in front of John at that point, I made the move on Will. So when I made that move on Will, and the car, remember the BMs had ABS, so passing into Cops was not quite as difficult as perhaps it would be any other time. But yes, we ran wide, and I thought, right, that's job done. I honestly thought that's job done, because Steve was behind. John was behind. I thought that was job done, but of course we delayed ourselves, and they both again because of once again because of that ship, isn't it?
Yes.
But I've got Steve in between. I mean, we. Again, this isn't, none of this is choreographed. It just unfolded on the track as the lap unfolded. Steve used the ABS to get up the inside of John into club.
Yep.
Which again was a perfectly fair move. I mean, it was an absolute fair move. I don't know. I don't know why John reacted the way he did, because he lost it in the car. That was what all this was about. And he missed the gear change. He hit the limiter and he missed his gear change, which was why I got a run at him up through Bridge, or up through Abbey and into Bridge. Yeah. If he hadn't missed that gear, he wouldn't have lost momentum. But he had effectively lost it in the car. I don't know why. He just did. He just saw these BMWs sort of ganging up on him, and he lost it.
The red mist came down.
And the red mist. So his then, when obviously I went past him and Steve opened the door for me to slot in front of him, John has just seen everything unravel, because I'm sure when he went past me, when I went off with Will, he probably thought, job done, I'm back in the lead, job done. And all of a sudden it's just completely unraveled, hasn't it? Yeah. Bearing in mind, and he's already lost it in the car anyway. So his move on Steve was out of anger and frustration and everything else. It was never a move that was on to overtake him. He was always going to hit him. And Steve obviously just reacted in the same way back to him. But at that point, I was already winning the championship.
Yeah, you were up the road. Yeah,
I was already in the lead, and that was it. That was job done, because I'd led John earlier in the race, and I don't think he had the pace. I always had pace in hand. I was just marking myself off them. So I think it just unravelled for John, and I feel his frustration. I'd have been just as frustrated. Yeah. I totally get it. But that's just how it happened, and it was never planned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually spoke with Steve at Super Touring, the first incarnation of it, and we were talking about that. And he actually said that he was brought in by BMW to help BMW for the last few rounds. It's important to say that at no point, because people think this was the case, and it absolutely wasn't. At no point was Steve asked to take John out, and at no point would he have ever done it deliberately, because Steve, that he races hard, he races fair. He's not that bloke. He isn't going to do that. I think it's important to clear that up. Obviously, we all saw what went on. They came off and they spun, and John went round to try and stick one on him. The man's an animal, and all that. The classic stuff that people are putting in the comments at the moment. You didn't see any of that. Obviously, you were past. Were you aware that they had tangled and gone off and everything?
No, not really. I mean,
not until you came round again, I guess.
I obviously, as I've then driven out of Luffield in front of them and come round Woodcote, and I've looked in the mirror and there's nobody there. So I know something's happened at that point, because I've got a big gap and I can't see John or Steve. And then obviously I come round on the next lap, at the end of the lap, and I can see the car in the gravel. When I saw John in John's car in the gravel, I didn't even really see Steve's. All I saw was John's, because that was the only guy I was racing against.
Yes.
And with a good lead over Will, I just had the last lap to complete, and I knew the job was done. But I didn't know what had happened at that point.
And obviously, we heard from Ronan Pearson earlier this year. When he won his first race, that last lap, he was convinced there was something wrong with the car. He's thinking, I've got a puncture, something's rattling. Jake said the same thing this year. He thought he had a puncture. He was just things going on in his head. Did you have that at all on that last lap? Were you thinking, God, just stay together? What's that noise? What's that bump? What's that rattle? Did you have any of that kind of concern of, this is all going to go Pete Tong for me?
No, you don't think it's going to go Pete Tong. You just think, keep your focus. Don't go and drop it and do something stupid. You can back it off a tenth or two and be comfortable. Just don't keep your concentration. Just do another lap and don't think about anything else. That's all you're thinking about.
Good. It's good to hear. I mean, I spoke with Eddie Cheever. He won the Indy 500. He said the same thing. He got into the lead with 10 laps to go. And he said, I didn't allow myself to think of anything else. I said, I'm going that way. And that's it. Just do it right. He said, yeah. Because I'd have probably been in Ronan Pearson's camp. I'd have been bricking it. But crossing the line, obviously, someone did say, we should say, this is Andy Rouse's last ever BTCC win.
It is, yeah. 60th and last win.
Absolute legend, Andy Rouse. So we've got to, big thumbs up to him. But again, it's that old thing. People forget who won the race. Because you came home, was it fourth? I can't remember where you were. Yeah. But you came round, crossed the line, you're BTCC champion. Mm. It's a silly question, but what does that feel like?
It's a whole gamut of emotions, isn't it? It's a whole load of emotions, from relief. You ask any driver who clinches a championship, and the first reaction emotion they have is always relief, because, as I said in my sort of build-up, you know that so many things can go wrong. So there's a relief at getting the job done is the first thing, and then there's obviously a wave of happiness, excitement, pride, all sorts of things. As I said at the start, Andy Rouse was one of my heroes. I used to watch him as a kid racing Triumph Dolomite Sprints in the British Saloon Car Championship, and I'd actually then race with his team, and then I'm invited up on the podium after winning the championship, and he's won the race, and there's the picture, and I was so proud. It's a culmination of a dream, isn't it? And it's something. In that moment, that your name is etched in the history books. I think that's the thing. It is etched in the history books. So you're not quite aware of what will happen with the rest of your life, but you will forever be referred to as former British Touring Car Champion, ex-British Touring Car Champion. That is forever there, and Jake will have that now. He will forever be a British Touring Car Champion. And that's a wonderful thing to have. It's a wonderful thing to have. To win championships,
the trophy and everything.
Yeah, there's that famous trophy with your name on it, and that will forever be there. And that's why we go racing. That is absolutely why we go racing.
Yeah, it's worth all the lows just for that moment, that day, isn't it? Where it all comes together. That's lovely to hear. Just quick, I'm just looking at the time. Crikey, I've got a few bits to zap through here, but Vic Lee, we've got to talk about Vic Lee, because, as you said before, he's got headlines for
all the wrong reasons.
For all the wrong reasons, unfortunately. That's what he's known for. Similarly with Jerry, but I saw the question here. Oh, just very quickly on 92. Yes, it was fourth. Rouse, Allen, and David Leslie. Yeah, absolutely right. Vic Lee. Now, I did see something here. I can't find the comment. I'm just scrolling here. No, sorry, folks, I can't find who it was. If you asked the question, thank you. How did it affect the team with what happened with Vic? It must have been a bit of a blow when he spent time at Her Majesty's pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I've often said there's a from our point of view, because obviously none of us knew anything about this, and we've gone from literally. I was talking to Vic Lee the morning he got arrested about our test program and what we were going to do prior to Donington, the next race. Right. And I mean, at that point in our conversation, I think Vic actually knew that he was about to be arrested. Yet the conversation I had with him was pretty normal for, half an hour or so, as if nothing had happened. But he at that point knew that his truck had been impounded, and the driver and everything. He knew it was all about to crash down. And what happened from that point on for the next sort of week, 10 days, 2 weeks was just literally a book's worth of stories, because obviously we went from thinking everything had finished to and every sponsor, Shell, Listerine, Yokohama, BMW particularly, wanting to just disassociate themselves, run for the hills, have nothing further to do with it, not have anything out there, to actually hold on a second. none of the cars or equipment has been impounded because Customs and Excise had put an inspector in to look at the business, thinking that the business was running off the proceeds of drug smuggling. They put an inspector in. He'd seen all the transfers of money from the sponsors, and actually nothing averse in the account to suggest that anything was wrong, which is why they didn't seize any of the equipment.
Right.
Nothing was impounded, nothing was seized. Vic was taken out of the equation, but everything else was still there. Right. So it then became an exercise, and this was primarily from Ray Bellm and Steve, to convince the sponsors that actually, if you disassociated yourself from the events that Vic had unfolded, you actually look guilty by implication or by association, if you like.
Yeah.
If we just carried on but took the Vic Lee motorsport off everything, then actually it looked like Vic was the only person involved, and we were. But that took a huge leap of confidence and faith and discussion to get to that point. From burn all the clothing and we're out of here.
Jeez.
Amount went into that. The phone calls were all day, every day, everything going on. And, I've said it before, but when we turned up at the next test, the next touring car test, which was at Donington, nobody thought for one moment that we were even going to be there. They thought the whole business had gone, Vic had gone, we wouldn't be there. And we literally had the truck outside the paddock waiting for a call from Tom Purvis, head of BMW, to say whether we could actually go in and take part or not. And he gave that call, and we just said to the boys, right, just keep your head down, do your job, don't talk to anybody about Vic. Let's just get on with our job and do what we know what to do. And we ended that day first, and Steve and I first and second in the times on the official test. And I could tell you, that was one of the other times I had a massive lump in my throat, because it took so much to get there. And it was just us doing what we love to do. And, yes, we'd lost Vic, our leader, but we still had a job to do, and we wanted to do it. And a chance of the championship, which again was, in my mind when I did win the championship ultimately. And I'm sure Vic would tell you, if you actually spoke to him, it was probably his greatest sadness that he couldn't be there that day. All because of his own actions. So that there's an awful, besides the John Clell, Steve Soper incident, the whole year is such a roller coaster of things happening. That's why I say there's a book in it.
There should be a book on it.
So much went on in that year, and in fairness, that made it all the more special and memorable, particularly, than any other year.
Yeah, and I guess because it was all on the brink of collapse, or you thought it was on the brink of collapse,
absolutely.
And you go from there to where it ended up.
Absolutely.
Amazing. And again, it's important to reinforce that you guys had no idea what was going on, obviously. Obviously in hindsight, I've seen a few bits with Vic, and he sort of said words to that effect. He basically said I was very, very silly, shouldn't have done it, and I wish I hadn't. Which is all you can say, really, isn't it? I just want to step forward though to '93 in the Renault 19.
Do we have to?
Well, we're not going to talk about it at length because it wasn't the best. However, 1993 at Donington, something happened that day. Some Brazilian fella did something. I make a point of this on the page every year. I always start that day of, on this day, Ayrton Senna did this. And then in the lunchtime post is always, but let's not forget, there was another chap in the yellow Peugeot who did rather well. It's a famous day in motorsport, and Ayrton Senna takes all the headlines from it. But your drive was absolutely monumental. It was amazing drive, but just how wet was it? Have you driven in anything like that before or since?
I'm sure I have, but I mean, you know, I mean, as people and time unfolded, people sort of know that I was always a good wet weather driver and won a lot of races in the wet. And in actual fact, that I always put that down to my background on trials and motocross bikes, because of the feeling of being loose, feeling for grip in tricky conditions. That's part and parcel of riding a dirt bike. And I always think it gave me an advantage in the wet. I was quite happy with the car sliding around and feeling for grip. But on that day, I mean, the conditions were terrible. There's actually a video of it, which, because I haven't seen the race back particularly until little clips start appearing on YouTube and things. And there's a video of it, and you can just about pick out my car on the first lap. And as we go round Redgate and then disappear towards Hollywood, I virtually drove off the track to the left because I just couldn't see. I just couldn't see anything. That's how bad the conditions were. And of course, if I had, that would have been it. But eventually the field spreads out. There's a bit more visibility. You can use the pace in the car, and particularly the pace in the tyres, which was the big thing that day. And pick your way through. The funniest thing or two funny things about that was, Alan Menu being really pissed off that I'd won the first race for Renault. The second one was in the Parc Ferme at the end of the race. Charlie Lamb from Schnitzer was on the phone to Munich and BMW, and obviously I knew Charlie from the BMW days I'd had just prior, and he was on the phone to them, and I heard him say, Tim Harvey won the race. And they obviously said, can you repeat that? Because he had to say, Tim Harvey won the race in the Renault 19. And I'll just never forget it. The one glory moment in that car's history.
It was certainly a high spot. Absolutely. Did you get to meet any of the F1 guys that day? Because there's some good guys on the grid, weren't there? I remember that in F1.
Sorry, Rich, you broke up again.
No, say again. Did you meet any of the F1 guys that day? Did you bump into any of them mooching around? Because obviously Senna was there, and Andretti and Prost and Hill.
No, I mean, we were actually parked up in the exhibition centre, right. So we didn't have access to the F1 pits or anything. So no, we didn't rub shoulders. I can't say I rubbed shoulders with Senna or anything on that day.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Now, see, everyone talks about Senna going from, what was it, 5th to 1st or 4th to 1st, whatever it was, but you went from 14th to 1st, and that needs more credit.
Although Max Verstappen went from 17th to 1st on Sunday, so
see, that was amazing. I mean, I've actually seen people saying, "Oh yeah, but a few cars drove."
He was
just let him through. It doesn't matter if that was Lewis Hamilton or Ayrton Senna doing that. Nobody would be saying about people moving over and getting up there. That was a brilliant drive. Love him or hate him, that was.
Yeah, that was absolutely Max at his best, and that is why, in terms of ability, he is an alien in motorcycle terms. He is exceptional because his feel for the car. I mean, he was out braking people into turn 1 from miles back.
Yes,
never locking up, never running wide, and I mean that was massive feel that he had for the car and the grip available.
I think that's why
even when he was in the lead at the end, he was smashing fastest lap after fastest lap after fastest lap.
17 times he did it.
Yeah, he literally made everyone else look like they were in a different category. Yeah, it was a brilliant drive. I'm not a fan of his defensive driving tactics. I'm really not. I think it's absolutely beyond the pale. But you mustn't let that detract from the guy's talent. He's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And mentioning about coming from so far back, that's why it looked like others were just getting out of the way, because they thought, where the hell did he come from? Because that's why. But fantastic drive. I think one thing about 1994, Renault Laguna, new car, better car, clearly. One thing a few people have asked me about, not Hill, because Tarquini in his role and Murray Walker going ultrasonic. How did it happen from your side?
Well, I mean, it was my fault, obviously, because I tapped him. But I made a dive. I made a dive for the inside by taking the speed down the dip, and I made a dive for it. Left my braking later. Your course you could do. You've already gone beyond your normal braking point to try and get it up the inside, but Gabriele actually braked later than I thought he was going to. He then started to turn into the corner, and I just couldn't get out of the way. I tried to get up the inside curb a bit more, but we had a tiny touch on his right rear, and it was only a tiny touch. I didn't run into the back of him. He actually clipped the front of me as he turned into the corner, yeah. and it just sent the car, didn't it? It absolutely sent it. I mean, I do always maintain that car didn't only needed to run over a penny on the road to virtually tip up.
It wasn't the most stable, was it?
It was a very narrow track, and there's plenty of shots of it up on two wheels, coming through the chicane at Knockhill and things. So, sorry, Donington. So it was already a little bit suspect. I'm sure if it'd been any other car, it might have just nudged it wide and that would be fine, but it literally just sent it. It was not a good sight to see from my point of view, because I didn't want to see a friend of mine in a bad accident, and I obviously knew that I was going to cop the flag for it anyway, which I did quite rightly. But there were some extenuating circumstances. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, if it happened 10 years later, it wouldn't have had that result. We'll put it that way. And I had Gabriele on here, and he holds no grudge against you. It's absolutely fine.
We laugh about it now. Well, I do anyway.
He's a good, I'm sure he would as well. Yeah. Just as Andrew Bishop on Facebook, he just said, without the Renault 19, you wouldn't have had the Renault Laguna. Tim developed lots on the best BTCC cars. Right, good stuff. 95, right, Tom Walkinshaw, Volvo. I love it's controversial here. 94, the Volvo estate. I wasn't a fan. I think I'm the only one who wasn't a fan. I don't know why. I never took it. I preferred the one you drove. Brilliant looking car. Tom Walkinshaw must have been fun to work for.
I mean, there's another bloody book in this one, but trying to do it quick. I mean, I knew Tom Walkinshaw well from Austin Rover days back in when I'd been with running the Vitesse and Austin Rover and my scholarship and things. So I knew him through that. He'd actually once stood in the way of me when I had my Rover in '87, and they did a deal. Walkinshaw did a deal to run an extra car at the Tourist Trophy in Estelle colours, the same colours as my car, with Denny Hulme and Jeff Allen in the car.
Denny Hulme.
Drive, because I wanted to drive in the T. Thought I was deserving of it, but they said I was, too inexperienced, too young, and of course that car won the bloody race. Had I been able to get in that car and do that, would have been fantastic. It's big. It was European Touring Car Championship. It was Tourist Trophy at Silverstone. So I was actually a bit cheesed off with Tom, but I also knew him from the Group C days when I raced Spice against the TWR cars, and so I knew him well, and he was always very chatty as a fellow competitor or team owner. He was always very chatty towards me. The moment I signed a contract to work for him, suddenly the relationship changed, and as Tom did with all the people that worked for him, he worked on the fear principle. So he had everybody in his organisation in fear of getting something wrong or doing something. So he was quite, that's just how he ran his organisation. He was a very imposing, dictatorial boss. Ironically, after I stopped driving for Tom, actually he was friendly again, and put me in his S40 in Bathurst later on.
Yes.
But he was just very different to work for. And I mean, I've told this story before, but when I won the first race in Brands in the wet in '95, and then in those days there was 10 minutes between the races, and the starter motor failed on the between the races on the weighbridge, in fact, and so they had to try and change the starter motor before race 2, and I couldn't take part in it, couldn't line up on the grid. But after the first race win, when I thought he'd be all happy and excited, he said to me, "Oh, that was acceptable," because to Tom, winning the race was merely doing your job. You know, that's what he expected to do. So there was no great celebration or anything.
Wow.
And then when the starter motor failed, I couldn't take the grid, and he came down to talk to me by the car. I said, "Tom, that's less than acceptable," which he didn't think was very funny.
Anyway, I bet that went well.
Yeah, as everyone knows, that race, I started from the pit lane. It got red flagged on race 1 because of an accident. The grid reformed and I could take my grid position, and I then won race 2 as well. Yeah. And you talk about what you're thinking about on the last lap. Well, on the last lap of that race, I'm thinking, I wonder what Tom Walkinshaw's going to say now. I've won both races, this one effectively from the pit lane. And he said after the last one that was acceptable. I wonder what he's going to say this time. Anyway, so I drive around thinking this, come into the pit lane. I'm looking for him. The team are there, Roger Silverman, all the boys. Can't see any sign of Tom. And I got 8. So, but the car was lovely. I love that Volvo, the 5-cylinder engine. You know, it was a fabulous piece of kit. It was great fun, and I enjoyed that. I actually enjoyed my experience with TWR.
Oh, brilliant! That's great. I love that. So goodness me. I did see in the comments earlier on. I think it was Dave Cox. Evening, Dave. I hope you're feeling well, mate. He asked what was the difference, I guess, between, was it the 850 in '95 and then the V40 you drove at Bathurst? I think any car around Bathurst is going to be different, isn't it? But it was a hell of a car.
Yeah, I mean, just firstly, to clear up the difference between the estate car and the saloon, it was actually no different. All of the running gear, the roll cage, everything was exactly the same. The only bit that was different was the roof. So literally, it was just cut out the back and the window put in, and it was a saloon car. It was no different other than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so there really wasn't any different. I mean, obviously the car got developed for the following year, but fundamentally it was no different. The S40, which came later, was a fundamentally different car. I mean, that was, you know, super touring, year on year, things got better. We all know the story, and that was a lot later, and the car was significantly better.
Yeah. I thought it might have been. So I think with the old estate versus the saloon, I think it might have been the aesthetics. Maybe I just didn't like the look of it.
Yeah,
probably me. Probably me. No, that's fair enough. Excuse me. Just to zap on to well, okay. No, one thing I want to mention though. Okay, I spoke with John Cleland a few years back, 2 or 3 years ago, and he wasn't happy with what went on at Brands and issues with the camera and all this kind of stuff. What's your take on all that stuff that he was getting?
Do you mean when he went off and came back on and then
off again and back again and
tried to race me into paddock and went off again?
Unlapping himself, and he was blaming you for left, right, and centre.
I'm not sure quite how it could be my fault when I was leading the race, but anyway, I thought it was very funny. I mean, you know, John came back onto the track. He wanted to race me into paddock. He went off. I thought it was very funny. I laughed in the car when it happened, obviously.
Oh, really?
I mean, it was irrelevant to me. He wasn't in my race anyway. You know, he'd already been off. So
he was unlapping himself, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was absolutely. Yeah, it was irrelevant to me. I didn't know what he was trying to do, really. But it was quite amusing from my side of things.
Yeah, I've just seen another thing about that. Keith Mail, Keith. He said something about masking tape and a camera from John as well. Something about something went on with there. He said that I don't know, something was going on with tape over a camera, in car or something.
That was another of bloody Tom Walkinshaw's ideas. So he decided. So it was when the clerk of the course was started to use in-car cameras for judicial purposes rather than for television.
Yes.
Yeah, and anyway, so Walkinshaw, I think we'd been done the race before, myself or Rickard or something, for some offence, and they'd had one camera angle of it, and it was a bad camera angle, and we were a bit miffed about it. And Tom then came to the next race at Snetton, and he said, "Well, we'll stuff that camera," and got one of the mechanics with a big dollop of grease on his hand when they pushed the car back on the grid to smear it over the lens. And I knew this was all going on. It wasn't. Honestly, I swear on my kid's life, it was not because we had any plan to take anybody out or do anything. Right. He was just trying to stop the camera being used if anything did happen. Anyway, what we'd all forgotten was that the in-car camera and the audio was running while we're having this chat in the car on the grid.
Okay.
Anyway, in the race, I have had an incident. I think it was with Alain Menu, actually. But nothing happened at the racetrack. It was one of those incidents. And then when BHP, the TV production company, were running through all the cameras and everything, they heard this discussion that took place in the car, and then obviously alerted Alan Gow, who summoned us to a meeting to find out what was happening at before the race at Alton Park, and presented Roger Silman with a £10,000 fine that he had to pay before we could go out for qualifying. So then Roger Silman had to ring Tom Walkinshaw and say, "Oh, your little plan's backfired to the cost of £10,000." So, yeah, that was that one.
Oh dear! I think I'm sure John had other thoughts in his head about why it all happened, but I'm glad it's been cleared up, which is it's good. Yes, we just had a comment in the comment section. Whoops. Yes, whoops. Just as I brought Peugeot 96 to 98, not the best. It just didn't quite click with Peugeot, did it?
Look, well documented.
Earlier on, I did see someone mentioned about the front end suspension. I'm just going to try and find it. Just have a quick scroll. Where are we? I'm just going to try and find it. If I can't, then I'm going to zap on. No, we'll come to it shortly. Anyway, yeah, somebody was saying about the front end suspension stuff on the Peugeot, and it wasn't quite working well. It just didn't quite work, did it?
No, it's a well documented story, but the Peugeot touring car team, and bear in mind we're getting to the point where touring car budgets are stratospheric, and you know, we've got little Peugeot UK trying to fund and run this whole team. And it's not Peugeot France, it's Peugeot UK, right. a small company. And they're trying to do this with no help whatsoever from the French. And, you know, actually, I think we punched above our weight. Yes, we never quite won a race. And the car, you know, it may not have been quite as good. Well, it wasn't quite as good chassis-wise as the best. It wasn't quite as good engine-wise as the best. But, you know, we were trying to do that up against the might of, you know, Williams, Renault and ProDrive. You know, I mean, we didn't really, I mean, on reflection, we probably didn't have the ingredients to do the job. But I think we gave it a good shot. You know, myself, Patrick, Paul Radicic, you know, we tried really hard. And the team, you know, MSD tried really hard. You know, I think we did the best that we could. It was just a real shame we didn't get the support from Peugeot France that they put into Laurent Aiello and the German Touring Car Championship. You know, if we'd had a smidgen of that help, we'd have done a lot better.
Yeah. Just, yeah, one of those. I mean, I think people see the name Peugeot and think, oh, that's got to be full Peugeot factory. And it wasn't, was it? It kind of wasn't a full.
It was Peugeot Coventry.
Yeah. And trying to take those on with the budgets that were in place, it was obviously an uphill battle. Just quickly, someone just said that the green and gold livery on the car was amazing. Absolutely right. That's from Andrew Rankin. Absolutely brilliant looking car. But you had Patrick Watts and Paul Radicic as teammates. I had Paul on here last year, and he said that he enjoyed, the time he had as teammates. Two very different kind of guys, from what I can gather. It must have been what was it like having those two chaps as teammates? Kind of chalk and cheese, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I knew Patrick obviously from years before production saloon car racing. He used to race in the Fiat Uno and various other cars, and so I've known Patrick for donkey's years, and he was another Kent-based driver as well. So I knew Patrick very well. I didn't know Paul actually as well, only from being a driver in the Touring Car Championship. With Ford. What I would say, though, is Patrick is not just unlike any other teammate, he's unlike any other person. Full stop. Because Patrick, he just has this way of thinking outside the box that nobody else does. And nothing's insurmountable. He's always got an idea, always positive. He was a bloody quick driver as well. But Patrick he wasn't a great analyst of, where the speed came from or anything else. He just did it all naturally. He was a very natural driver. Yeah. Paul was much more studious, professional, sort of thing you'd expect. So very different, but loved them both. Yeah, loved them both.
Yeah. And that thing about Patrick, there's always a solution to a problem and all that kind of a thing. I mean, he's just done Paris to Peking, hasn't he?
Yeah.
In his old car, and that
sums it up, really. Yeah,
to sum him up completely. And also well done to his daughter Amy. She did very well in the Mazdas this year, which is very cool. Sorry, it was Pete Banham on YouTube asking about the suspension. Sorry, Pete. Yeah, he said solid front in Europe and sprung suspension Peugeot in the UK. There you go. That's a bit of insight. There you go. And there's a comment here about the SO Ultron car and the rain that you nearly won in at Thruxton. Yes, I remember that one. Yeah, that was again wet weather.
Neat story of my life. Needed one more lap, you see.
It's good. Yeah. But yes, I do remember that one. Okay, just very quickly. Obviously, Team Dynamics was born out of the remnants of Vic Lee, wasn't it? I believe Steve Neal went in and bought some bits and set the team up. You ended up racing for them in 2002. Was it? I mean, what was the thinking behind coming back? Was it just fancied like another year in the...
that wasn't a Team Dynamics job. That was a Vic Lee Motorsport job. That was the orange Halfords 406s.
Yes, the orange. Okay.
Yeah, and that was Vic Lee running that.
Was it? Okay.
And it was myself and Steve Soper. And basically Vic was, if you like, trying once again to relive things that had gone on before, but the car was too big. It was a massive car. It looked a massive car. It looked like it should have had a V8 in it and been racing in Australia or something. It was just a bit too big for a 2-litre car, so we never got the results with it that we hoped for. So that was the end of my touring car career.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
Then some TV bloke said to me, "You thought car commentary and car commentary, and free to the present day. I've done. That's all I've done."
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch on that very, very shortly. I want to just one thing I've been asked to ask you about Bathurst. My apologies for this question, Andrew Bishop on Facebook. This is all on you, my friend. It says, "Can you ask Tim how were the crown jewels after your crash at Bathurst?"
I thought that might be coming. I thought that one might happen.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'm delighted to report they're in full working order and no lasting injury.
Good. Very pleased to hear. Awesome. But I do know, I did see somewhere, Tom Walkinshaw was very lovely. He upgraded your flight home, didn't he?
He did, yeah, exactly. See, that was a nice side of Tom Walkinshaw again. I mean, I'd had this massive accident with Greg Murphy on some oil going down the dipper and straight to a concrete wall.
Oil on the dipper is not what you want, is it?
It's not, no. So it was a big accident, and the car was written off, which was really bad from Walkinshaw's side of things, because he actually sold the car to Jim Richards to race in the Touring Car Championship the following year in Australia. So that wasn't good. But in spite of that, Tom's concern was if I was okay, and in order to make me more comfortable, sort of bought me a first class ticket to fly home, which was extremely kind of him. The funny side of it is just that it was my wedding 7 days later.
Oh.
And, I basically had to walk down the aisle like John Wayne with a pair of Victoria plums between my legs. So my friends thought this was highly amusing.
Well, it's a different set of wedding photos, isn't
it? Exactly.
Goodness me. Yeah, dear. I mean, just to finish up on Bathurst, fantastic circuit. I mean, it's on my bucket list. I remember Matt Neal said he broke down, and he said, I forget, I think I can't remember who he was racing for, but he broke down up on the mountain, and the opponent's fans, it was Ford Holden, and the opponent's fans were throwing full beer cans at them. I mean, he said, yeah, you kind of know that they hate you when they're throwing full beer cans at you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great place. It's a wonderful place. It's a fantastic event. I'm lucky enough to have raced GT cars there and touring cars, and it's a brilliant circuit. Absolutely love it. It's a brilliant circuit. Yeah, and obviously Australians love their motorsport. They're mad keen followers. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. I'd love to get there. Brilliant. Just another couple of bits. You raced at Fuji and Macau in the Asia Pacific and the Japanese touring cars. Two very different circuits. Two circuits I'd love to get to. I've spoken to a lot of people who have raced at Macau. They absolutely love it. I think Tom Coronel said it was his favourite. Robert Dornbos said it's a daft idea, but it's brilliant. What were your thoughts on racing and winning at Macau?
Yeah, I mean, and I said earlier, I always did well at street circuits, and you've mentioned Bathurst is a bit like a street circuit.
It's public roads, isn't it? Yeah.
Birmingham Super Prix, Macau. Obviously, I won out. A fantastic track. It's a great time of year. It's the end of the year. You're going out to the Far East. It's a big adventure. The culture's different. It's warm. The circuit is incredible. You've got this incredibly fast first section, then a really tricky technical section across the top. It's a brilliant circuit, and I've always loved it out there. I think it's fantastic, and I can understand why people think it's one of their favourite circuits. Bathurst again is another street type circuit, and in fact it came up this week. You mentioned it was 30 years ago at the end of my 94 year with Renault in the UK that we went off and did this Asia Pacific series, and I won at New Zealand, another street circuit. So
yeah, Wellington.
Yeah,
terrific circuits. Terrific, yeah, Macau's brilliant. There's obviously loads we could cover, but I just do want to zap quickly. I mean, we've got to talk Porsches because you stepped away from the BTCC, went into Porsches, and it all went rather well. I mean, you've raced for some great teams as well in the Porsches, but 2008 and 2010 obviously stand out. Obviously, you still want to win. That never leaves. Did you think you were going to go so well as you did in those years? Because I mean, you with Redline, who were very, very, very good team, as we know.
Well, it started off in 2003. Yeah, and I had a couple of guest drives because Porsche ran a VIP car and had a couple of guest drives. And in the second one, I beat Richard Westbrook and won at Donington. And that was what sort of made me think, oh, this is fun. Back in a rear-wheel drive car, which I absolutely loved. And Robin Mortimer, bless his cotton socks, was running a car and wanted me to drive for him the following year. And he put together the sponsorship deal with Porsche Centre Solihull and a couple of other sponsors. And, I then ended up racing Carrera Cup until 2011. So, it was almost like a second career, if you like. It was the perfect thing for me to do because I could combine it with doing commentary as well. People forget I was racing and commentating at the same time.
Oh, we've frozen. Just a little freeze.
To run down to the car in my overalls straight, everyone else had done all their prep and everything else, I'd jump in at the last minute and then go out and try and win the race. Or the other way around, I'd finish a race and have to run up to the box and commentate on a touring car race, which was always much harder because you've got all the emotion and adrenaline running from the race, and you're trying to then actually forget that and just concentrate on the touring cars. But it was a great, I love those cars. Porsches are, real special cars for me. I had actually done a couple of Super Cup races earlier in my career, so I knew what Porsches were like, and they just naturally fitted my driving style. And as many people know, I'm out in a Porsche GT3 regularly on track days and things, and still love it.
Oh, fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. And I think I speak for everyone when I saw that you'd won in 2008, 2010, I was just so happy because obviously I've been watching you racing for so long, and you would just prove that all the, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, younger drivers, and you were there just beating them. And it was really good to see. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, I was sort of in my 50s then, and I used to say these young drivers, they're either half my age or half my weight. So it was quite nice to still be winning. Yeah.
There's no substitute for experience and knowing what you're doing. There you go. Just quickly, Porsches this year. Obviously, George Gamble won the championship. So some very sort of big names on the grid had come down from the touring cars, and it was a great season, wasn't it? And it was great seeing guys like Dan Lloyd, Stephen Jelley, Abby Eaton, her historic win. Ollie Jackson's on the grid. Also, these very, very good youngsters. George was on here a few weeks ago, and Angus Whiteside impressed me. Charles Rainford really impressed me this year. It's a really, really good mix of talent on the grid, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean that was if you like the beauty of Carrera Cup this year. There was no one standout driver, not to take anything away from George winning the championship or anybody else, but lots of people had that looked on their day to be the class of the field, and we had some fantastic racing. Obviously I'm passionate about watching the Porsches, and I thought it was a great championship year. And then again, it went down to the last race. So, it was a brilliant year for Carrera Cup, and the entry was up this year as well. That was good. Yeah. When you've got 25 of those cars on the grid, the noise and the sound and the spectacle is fantastic. And I know some people who touring car, keyboard warriors, they'll say all the support races are boring and this and that and the other. But you have to understand, what each one of those. They are hard cars to drive fast. There's action control. They are really pushing them, and you just have to appreciate the skill that they've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Stephen Jelley said it this year. I spoke to him earlier this year on here, and he said the car's completely different to what I remember. It's a really difficult car to drive.
It is.
It's great. Our friend Vitola, she said she's got a toe eye from one of the Porsches as a paperweight on her desk. That's cool. I like that.
That is cool.
Yeah, obviously from a shunt. And she's also a Charles Rainford fan. Yeah, absolutely. Big fan of Charles Rainford. He's very good. Okay, so I want to touch on the broadcasting. Firstly, just say thank you to you and Paul and Louise and Jade and Steve and Richard and David. Absolutely superb coverage, as always, this year. And it's obviously something that you love as well.
I do love it. It's the next best thing to being in the race, and sometimes when I'm watching, I'm so engrossed and I'm putting myself inside the car and thinking like the driver's thinking, and then trying to articulate that to people who are watching. And, you can feel what's going to happen. You can just feel what a situation about to arise based on how you would feel if you were in that car. And you can just see it coming sometimes. And it is a real pleasure because it is, like I say, it's the next best thing to being in the race. But there's never a dull moment in a touring car race. I mean, when bless him, Toby Moody was the anchor commentator for a while, and when he started, he turned up and he would plaster the whole commentary box with notes. And the first time,
Murray Walker.
The first time he did this. And I saw this, I just laughed. And he said, well, what are you laughing at? And I said, Toby, once the lights go out, you will not have a second to look at the notes. It will be non-stop. Trust me. And that's exactly how it is. Because all you could, there's a golden rule about doing commentary, and that is that you talk about the pictures that you are seeing. Because if you start talking about what you can see out the window, particularly, and sometimes we do if it's relevant, but if you don't concentrate on all the pictures that you are watching and talk about them, then the moment will be lost or gone. So, and it's so action-packed, as you know now, that you literally, from the moment the lights go out, you are constant.
Fully on it. Yeah, I mean, I've had David Addison and Richard John Neal on here, and it's something that David Addison actually said. He said that you've got someone in your ear all the time. You've got to see who's doing what, and they said you've got so much going on. And I said to him, I said, I'm never going to watch a touring car race in the same way again, knowing what you guys are going through
there's actually
in the comms booth.
There's program editor, producer talking, and you're listening to your co-commentator as well. So there's a lot going. Occasionally we'll take somebody into the box and give them a spare set of headphones, and they hear it all going on. They go, I don't know how you do it. Yeah.
I mean, one day I caught up with him at the British GT round at Brands, and I just said to him, that was incredible, the insights from inside the comms box, because as you said, I don't know how you do it. It's incredible. Okay, so a couple of things because we need to rattle through because we've overrun again. We always do. Sorry about that. Very quickly, TOCA Junior Championship. People are talking about the money and everything else, but I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be really good. It's a good stepping stone to get people onto the TOCA package. People are saying about the money and the cost and everything, but it's not that different from what you're spending in karting. So surely it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the reason people say it's too expensive is because they think it should be, if you like, a grassroots entry to motorsport, and it shouldn't be that expensive. Reality is, it's actually professional racing, even though it's, from a young age. If you want to go grassroots motorsport, you can go and do what, the Turkington boys have been doing and do some autocross or grass cross, or, there's a million other things you can do, but you would only do TOCA Juniors if you were trying to become a professional driver. So you have to think of it as being a professional driver stepping stone. It's not grassroots, family fun motorsport. It just isn't. So, the cost is reflective of that. I'm sure they'll have a good grid, and I'm sure it will prove a really good stepping stone to, other areas in motorsport, as the previous championship has already done. So, I mean, I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of the way the car looks, but if it serves the purpose and the racing is great, we'll forget that. Once we get some different liveries on cars and we're used to seeing them, we'll forget that. But I think the initial launch of the livery wasn't the best advert for the championship. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing I did see, I think it was Will Orton's father, I believe his name is Pete Orton. He said that the car's been designed with maximum visibility, had the big windows and all that kind of a thing, for young drivers who haven't got the full experience of racing cars, which is, I guess, why it looks how it looks. But as you say, I mean, if it delivers great racing, we'll all forget what it looks like. Okay, two things before we get into the little fun bits. Hybrid is going.
Glad you mentioned
coming in, all the this sustainable fuel, which is obviously trialled with Unlimited Motorsport. It all sounds rather good to me.
Sorry, you broke up again for a little while, but I think your question was about dropping hybrid for next year, wasn't it?
Yeah, the dropping hybrid and the new fuel. Yeah, it just all sounds good.
Well, look, I mean, can I just check Alan Gow doesn't listen to this before I say anything?
I don't think he's tuned in yet.
He's not very social media aware, so he probably doesn't.
Okay, that's fine. I think we're safe.
So what I was saying is that, and I don't want to say I told you so afterwards, but my view is that we introduced the hybrid as a politically correct box ticking exercise. Yeah. And I felt at the very beginning what we should have done is introduced a synthetic fuel, which would have ticked the box, required very little modification to the cars, and carried on. Because the reality is that hybrid has cost teams an absolute fortune.
So much.
It's cost them a fortune. it wasn't reliable to start with. It very often didn't work or malfunctioned or cost people races. When they had accidents, there was more parts to replace. It made the cars heavier and less fun to drive. And 9 times out of 10, when drivers were using it on the track, you couldn't even tell. And so for me, it never really worked. I mean, I'm not supposed to ever criticize anything in touring cars because, you know, I'm a commentator and I'm supposed to be impartial and things like that. But I never thought it was the right way to go. So for me, it's dropping it and having a boost only advantage or button, if you like, is absolutely the way to go. The cars will be lighter again. We won't be have this expense and complexity that we don't need. I mean, it's absolutely the right thing to do, and running on sustainable fuels is obviously a good step forward in terms of sustainability and looking to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of said as much this week, and I'm glad that you've sort of reinforced that. It feels like it's more like the IndyCar push to pass thing.
It is. It absolutely is. That's exactly what it is.
Which is brilliant. Someone said, "Is the old ballast coming back in?" Controversial. I hope not. I wasn't a fan of ballast. I made it very unfair. I know some of the team, you know, you've just won a race. Here's 75 kilos or whatever it is. Seems unfair. Anyway, no, but that's all fine. Okay, last thing before we do the fun questions at the end, tyre stacks. I am on the same page as you. I am on the same page. Track limits never used to be an issue. Tyre stacks were never a thing. The curbs were a bit higher. I think it was 87. I remember watching the Grand Prix in Austria, and the curbs were that high, 4 or 5 inches high, and the drivers stayed off them. We don't want to see cars get launched. I get there's things with gravel and don't want cars getting in and rolling, but gravel works. I think anyway.
Yeah, it does up to a point.
Yes.
You know, if you're having this discussion with the circuit owners, Jonathan Palmer in particular, he will tell you that if you have gravel up to the edge of the track, yes, drivers try to avoid it, but inevitably drivers go off and get stuck in it. And then A, it scatters, but B, you have constant safety cars while you're recovering cars from the gravel. And that's the big sort of no-no about having, yes, it works in policing, but it doesn't necessarily always work for the benefit of watching a race.
It doesn't solve the issue.
The reason we don't have high curbs is because of motorcycles. Say you've got a touring car race at Brands on a Sunday, and the circuit is running a motorcycle track day on the Monday. You can't change the curbs all around the circuit overnight to run your track day for bikes. And bikes obviously don't want high curbs. For me, there is no perfect solution. The problem is that because there's no solution, don't make things more dangerous by introducing a hazard. Because you don't have the necessary wherewithal to police the rule, you either just say, we'll let everybody get on with it because it's the same for everybody, or if you can't satisfactorily police the rule, which we know we can't because judges of facts can't be consistent, they can't get everybody, so that's an unfair way of doing it. We can't, cameras and sensors actually are at the moment the best deterrent, and they do work well at MSV circuits, but if you actually talk to the organisers, they'll tell you that the sensors and cameras don't work all the time, but at least the drivers know when they've been done it's a real thing. But putting tyre stacks, which is a real hazard, I mean, you know, MS UK's remit is to make racing safer. Well, you would never
put in the way isn't doing that.
It's not doing. If it was a broken down car, there'd be a safety car and you'd move it. So why would you do something similar? You know, the damage it causes, and very often to cars that are not guilty of anything, is absolutely criminal. And because you haven't got a way of enforcing a rule, then the rule shouldn't exist. You know, it doesn't exist on half the corners of the track anyway.
Yeah.
You know, if you say, well, why are you enforcing tell you, well, it's because it's a rule in the blue book. Don't enforce it at corners 5, 10, 9, 11 and 12. Why is that? Oh, well, we don't have enough people or cameras or anything else to do it.
Yeah.
In that case, the rule's unfit for purpose, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
End of.
Yeah. I mean, I actually came up with something, and I don't. It would take ages to roll out, and there's cost and everything. But we had like in Austria, a relatively flat curb, and then they put in like a little gravel, like a little strip of gravel, and then run off thereafter. So there's a deterrent. But if you do go over it, then I came up with this thing, and it cost a lot to rule out. It wouldn't have to. Surely, could it be you have the flat curb, and then behind it a cutout bit about, I don't know, 20 centimeters deep and a meter wide. There's essentially, on one side is runoff green curbs of area, so it works for bikes. Could you go around, flip it, and put some gravel in for cars? I mean, it would cost a lot, and it'd take a while to roll out. But I think it would kind of work. But then again, you got the issue of actually implementing it with the example you gave. With
I mean, the problem with the strip of gravel, sort of just beyond the track limit, it does work for cars, but again, it doesn't work for bikes, because if a bike runs wide and goes into the gravel, he's off.
And that's why I thought if it could be flipped and fixed somehow, almost like a gap underneath, and then you turn it over, and then there's a little tray that's that deep full of gravel that's existing on the outside.
I absolutely hear you. I hear you. I'm not sure.
It could be a thing.
It's sounding quite difficult from a sort of mechanical and practical and cost.
That's the issue, isn't it?
And I go back to the same situation. If you've got a car race on a Sunday and a motorcycle track day on the Monday,
exactly.
It's not going to work, is it? You just couldn't do it.
No, you do it at certain corners, but then and it just opens up another can of worms, doesn't it? So,
the answer, just to sort of finish it off, because we should wrap up, but the answer lies in technology. We have 7 out of 10 Formula One teams based in this country. We have the greatest motorsport technical, mechanical knowledge of anywhere in the world based at in this country. I cannot believe that there isn't a cheap sensor you can put in the track electronically and a sensor you can put in the car. There may not be at the moment, but if we used our combined technological might of motorsport to solve this problem, and if the car went over a certain pre-described limit, a big red light would flash up in the car and a big red light flash up. Done deal. And you wouldn't need tyre stacks, you wouldn't need different curbs. The answer lies in technology. But we're so far down this route of just making the drivers responsible for never breaking this rule that only applies at some corners and not others. We're so obsessed with making it the driver's responsibility, and the drivers are the ones that are paying the entry fee. They're paying to go out there. They get hit with all the costs when things go wrong.
Exactly.
And to add insult to injury, we'll put a hazard in the way just as well because we can't enforce our rule. You just think, come on, guys, just wake up and smell the coffee, because you're approaching this from completely the wrong angle.
Yeah, I said there's got to be something. I just seen a comment. We've got speed cameras and there's goal line technology in football. So there's something that we can do. But
the answer lies in technology, not in tyre stacks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good line. I like that. Okay, quickly, some fun questions right at the end. We'll let you get back because we always run over. I'm sorry about this, folks. We always run longer. Okay. Someone just said, who do you respect most on, or is there a driver that you really respect a lot on the grid at the moment? I guess that I'm going to assume that's like touring cars. Is there a driver who you think they do it the right way, or they're up and coming driver or experienced driver? Is there anyone who you think is particularly likable?
I think every driver has a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to admire Colin Turkington because he is the Alain Prost of touring cars, literally analysing every single detail to be a better driver. And, the fact that he had the most number of poles, won the Goodyear Wingfoot Award this year, he is a really fast racer. And, he did tend to win drives his championships by consistency. And people felt that when the Ash Suttons and Tom Ingrams and Jake Hills came along, Colin wouldn't still be a competitive driver for the championship. Well, he's shown this year he absolutely is. He is. I think he's been incredible this year. Totally different characters to say an Ash Sutton, but Ash's approach is actually every bit as diligent. The work he does with Tony Carosa, the work he does in the sim, the stuff they do as a team. He works really hard. So does Tom Ingram. Yeah. Jake has developed massively throughout the last couple of years, particularly to become a much more all-round driver. His technical knowledge is good. He's got a great working relationship with Craig, his engineer. He's learned a lot by being at West Surrey. He's got guidance of always outperforms the car. Always outperforms the car, and should be a championship winner at some point if he gets the opportunity. Just wish he'd smile more when he wins. But I admire all these guys. I'm not going to pick one out as a favourite over the others. I obviously have a special place for Dan Camish, having got him into the Carrera Cup a few years ago. Yes. But I don't have any involvement with Dan now. He's a fully established professional and knows exactly what he's doing now. And I think he almost has, him and Dan Rowbottom have the poison chalice like being Max Verstappen's teammate. It's bloody hard to be in the same team as someone like Ash. Yeah. But I think Dan has really impressed me, particularly this year. There's a lot of drivers out there I admire and like.
Yeah, very hard to pick just one. Okay, very quickly. What was the favourite car you raced in the BTCC? Did you have a favourite?
RS 500.
Yes. I'm glad, because I thought you might say BMW, but I was hoping for
RS 500.
Excellent, love that. Okay, have you got a favourite circuit that you raced at? Excuse me.
Yeah, my favourite piece of tarmac, my favourite circuit is the Nordschleife, the old circuit of the Nürburgring.
The proper one.
Yeah, there's nothing else like it in the world. 13 miles of apps. It's like 13 miles of Alton Park, Spa, Suzuka, Bathurst. Everything's put together. It's just the most incredible piece of tarmac. I love it. I mean, I have raced there, done the 24 hours, in fact, my last ever Porsche Carrera Cup win was on the Nordschleife when they did the World Cup race in 2011.
Oh, that's a lovely full stop to have, isn't it?
It's a nice one, yeah. So I love that circuit. I do love it. And I go out there and drive it with Porsche and Manthey and Michelin several times a year now with my GT3. I absolutely love it. Every lap there is fun. But there's so many good circuits from Suzuka, Bathurst, you name it. There's a lot of great circuits I love.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, quick one. Oh, okay. Very quick question here. Do you think Rockingham is a big miss in the BTCC? That's from Mark O'Neill. A few drivers like Rockingham. I went once. I was a bit 50-50 on it. But you're not a fan.
No, I'm not a fan. I think the place was soulless. The track was soulless. It was a nightmare to work at because everything was miles apart from it for itself. Honestly, no, it's no loss.
No, fair enough. Okay.
You wanted a quick answer, Rich. I gave you a quick answer.
That's cracking. Happy with that. More than happy. Okay, let's have a quick. Okay, is there a series you would have loved to have tried? F1, obviously, but is there anything that you'd like to have had a go at? More Aussie V8s or do that?
Yeah, I'd love to have done proper Aussie V8 racing. I'd also love to have done a full season of IMSA in America. The few times I went to America, I loved being in America. The way they do their motorsport is still very sport orientated.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd love to have done more IMSA racing in Group C cars. That would have been fun. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Two more. What's your favourite moment from your racing career?
I'm probably going to say my first Le Mans. Probably going to say my first Le Mans. The one I talked about earlier where I qualified, started, finished the race. That was probably one of the favourite moments. I mean, it would be obvious to say 92 Touring Car Championship, but with everything else that was going on around it, you almost didn't have time to just take pleasure in it. Whereas that Le Mans was just pure pleasure. There were no politics involved or anything else. It was just pure driving, racing pleasure.
This is the best way to go racing, isn't it? Yeah, when you're trying to buy. Okay, last question. Folks, sorry if I haven't covered everything in the comments. There's been loads of them. Thank you for all of them. Last one, I ask it to everyone. It's a shocking question. I don't know why I answer it, because there's no answer to it. You've raced against and with some amazing drivers. I'm just going to chuck a few names. I mean, you've raced against Aaron Slight, which is very cool, because I was a big fan of Aaron Slight. You've raced against guys like Wynne Percy and Frank Sitton and Mike Smith, God bless him. Matt Neal, Reed, Rydell, Radicic, Ratzenberg, all the R's there. Gravett, Turkington, Will Hoy, Keith O'Dore, obviously no longer with us. Plato Menu, Thompson, Muller, Warwick, Bob Wallach as well. Nigel Mansell in Le Mans and touring cars, and Johnny Herbert, Rouse and Schumacher and Stuck and Bell and all the guys at Le Mans. So many drivers that you've shared the track with. I mean, is there any that sticks in your mind as being special or different or anything like that, just for whatever reason? Anyone that you think, crikey, they're a bit good?
There's so many drivers, and the drivers you've just reeled off are all wonderful drivers. One thing I always sort of pride myself in my career that I would never have tried to orchestrate a situation where for my own advantage. So from the word go, when I was racing, whether it was Steve Soper or Andy Rouse or Rickard Rydell or Alan Menu or Paul Radicic, I never shied away from a fast teammate. And all of those guys, especially their own way. I did a thing for Autosport where they do who's your favourite teammate, and perhaps that's the nicest way to answer that question. And I had no hesitation in saying Rickard Rydell, because he was a fantastic driver. He used to really piss me off because I could match him in testing, and we tested a lot in those days. And somehow he would always find another tenth or two when it came to qualifying. And I'd think, how the bloody hell have you done that? But he was such a lovely man, or he is such a lovely man.
He is, isn't he? He is.
We had a great relationship, and he if I could pick one guy to go racing again with as a teammate, it would be Rickard.
That's lovely. That is a lovely, lovely answer. I love that. And he's been on here, and I've always said that he's the world's fastest florist, because he was.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
He had his business before back in Sweden. Yeah. No, that's lovely. Absolutely lovely. We've run over again. We always do. I mean, I could sit and talk to you for hours about Le Mans and GTs and everything like that, but we have to wrap up. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we've covered everything. There's a lot to cover. And we're back next week with a big one. So tune in for that one. We're going to announce it tomorrow. But, of course, biggest thanks to you, Tim. Thank you very, very, very much for coming on. It's been absolutely brilliant speaking with you.
No, you're welcome. And thank you for everybody that sort of followed it and tuned in. And I am only sorry I can't answer everybody's questions. Perhaps I need to do a series of evenings with.
Oh, we could do that. Yeah, well, part two. We'll see. We'll see what the new year can bring. We all need an off-season break first. But thank you to everyone. I mean, there's been over 400 of you tuning in live, which is very lovely. So thank you very much. Tim, it's been brilliant. I'm glad we finally got around to it. Thank you very much.
Happy Christmas to everybody. Stay safe and see you next year.
Yeah, we'll see everyone. We'll see Tim and everyone in 2005. Thanks very much again, guys. Thank you so much, Tim. And we'll see you.